OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
All right, it's bang on 7:30. You're very welcome along this Thursday morning to OTB AM. It's Jaron Eoin with you all the way through until 10. If you want to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. 087 9180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Or, of course, best way to get in touch with us these days is to leave a comment on the YouTube stream or tweet us at Off The Ball AM. Last night, important win for Manchester United. We'll talk about that with Daniel Harris in a few minutes' time. They beat Brentford 3-1 at Brentford. Brentford manager absolutely livid afterwards. Thought that his team were the better team and that it was a bit of a fluke that they hadn't been 2-0 up at half-time. And he might have been right. So if you're a United fan and you're delighted with the second half performance and the goals they scored and the fact they're able to grind out results when they're not the better team, then we'd like to hear from you. But also if you think they're in the middle of a crisis, because there's nothing in between,
No, there isn't. One half good, one half bad.
Rangnick genius, Rangnick spoofer. It's kind of over towards the genius when you win 3-1 away from home. But maybe it's spoofer because it's only Brentford. You got outclassed by Brentford. So I don't know.
Thomas Frank was livid afterwards, looking at his comments, saying that he hadn't seen anyone destroy Manchester United in a half of football since Liverpool dismantled them at the start of the season, which is a pretty high statement, if I do say so myself, from Thomas Frank, I guess. Even if you're looking through the performers last night, or even those who just got on the score sheet, Manchester United fans will be very happy to see Marcus Rashford scoring last night after there's been so many questions of him of late. A goal can help kickstart a season. I think you're talking about the arrow pointing from Rangnick genius, Rangnick spoofer. I think you can make a case now that he is officially at the stage of the crazy genius, where he's in his lab and there's these test tubes boiling over and all that, and he's like, which one of these things have I conjured up that will be the right solution for this team? Because he constantly is chopping and changing, but every so often in the midst of the chopping and changing there is this lucid version of Manchester United where they stumble upon a very, very good second half performance like they did last night.
I think that's definitely one way of reading it. I think also Anthony Elanga is very good. We'll get into some details about that. You're talking about Doc Brown, really. He's your inspiration for that, is he? From Back to the Future.
Doc Brown didn't really... I suppose he did have test tubes. Did have a bit of test tubes that boiled over and caused a bit of damage. Wasn't really the classical scientist, was he?
Oh, yeah.
I guess he was. I'm talking about more operating with
Frankenstein.
Mixing different liquids together in those jars.
Okay. And look, that, famously the UK rejected experts over the last half decade or so, and the stunning soaraway success that is Brexit is the result of that. So maybe Manchester United are embracing experts, and this is actually the birth of something new. So if you're a United fan and you're feeling one way or the other this morning, we'd love to hear from you. The other thing that happened last night was that Spurs were beaten with 93 and a half minutes on the clock by Leicester, and then somehow they managed to win the game. They won 3-2, 2 goals from Stephen Bergwijn, who's going to get kicked out this week. Possibly that might be his last action, or maybe this rescues his career, who knows. And maybe Matt Doherty rescued his career at Spurs last night with a second half performance. He was subbed on at half time when they were losing the game, and he has a central role in the equaliser that makes it 2-2. It wasn't
bounces off him.
It wasn't a pass. Well, he controls.
No, he does. It's a chest.
He controls the ball, but then he loses possession of it and gets taken out, and then kind of forces. John Duggan described it as a bit like a rugby player at that stage. But you've got to do what you got to do. When everything's on the line, he was there. Yeah. Antonio Conte likes that. I can tell you that Antonio Conte prefers that to a lot of the stuff that he's seen since he's got there. So who knows? Maybe that's a turning point for him. It would be brilliant if he was the right back, the right wing back for Spurs for the rest of the season. But again, we get into that a little bit later on. But I think this is the end of the Brendan Rodgers fluff and conversation, because just over the last, since he's been linked with the United gig, stuff like this has happened.
Yeah.
Winning positions, you're the better team, you lose the game, or you get spanked in the game you're not supposed to. It's just the Leicester bubble has burst.
I think we've had this conversation maybe a month ago. It was definitely before Christmas when we had it, and there was definitely a few moments over the Christmas period where you thought to yourself, right, that the bubble has not burst. Okay, the game against Manchester City, the scoreline does not look good. 6-3 is not something that you want to be complimenting a manager for, but the way they performed in that game, was possibly up there in terms of the against Manchester City performances this season. Granted, you lose by 3 goals, so it's very hard to actually stand over that statement. But the way they fought back into that game and made it more of a contest in was it the second half of that game, I think reflected well on the manager. They beat Liverpool, of course, in the league over Christmas as well. Like, I mean, these are 2 feathers in the cap of Brendan Rodgers. Certainly the latter of those 2, where you can't necessarily say that this thing has disappeared for him in terms of being one of the top Premier League managers. I'm not sure I fully subscribe to that. And then last night,
my point is he's not getting the United gig. Really, he's not going to be linked with that gig, or he might be linked with the Spurs gig the next time it comes around, but he's not getting the United gig now.
Yeah, like, I think that's fair, and maybe he was never going to get it, and the previous connection to Liverpool, I think, is possibly something that would have dissuaded anybody involved in the decision-making process to give him the gig, especially once you see what happened at Everton with Rafa Benitez. He would be on a short string of patience with the Manchester United fans immediately. But I see your point. Like, I mean, even at the end of last season, despite the fact that they didn't qualify for the Champions League, there was this sense that, you know, Brendan Rodgers is definitely a top 4 manager in the Premier League. And
in
really,
the making, yeah.
And at the end of last season, he possibly was in the top 4 managers in the Premier League. Like, I mean, you obviously have Tuchel, Pep and Klopp.
Yeah, you're putting him ahead of Solskjaer, clearly.
Yeah.
That's fair enough, and that's fine. And I think everybody would, but that's like a weird situation where the biggest football club in the world made an emotional decision where they hired a guy who wasn't qualified to do the gig, and they spent $500 million, and even he couldn't screw it up to the point where they were not qualifying for the Champions League.
Yeah.
So that's not like...
I mean, I think we just need to be a little bit cautious here. Like, we need to learn from the way in which David Moyes has been judged over the last 10 years. And like, David Moyes has had far greater low points than Brendan Rodgers has had over, whatever, the last 4 months.
Yeah.
So,
Sunderland, that time in Spain...
Exactly. There are a multitude of different things that's happened to him, and look at him now.
The first time at West Ham, it was fine, right? But I think Moyes might be a fair comparison. I don't think Moyes is getting one of those top 4 gigs again, is he?
If he hadn't got the Manchester United gig before, like, I'm just trying to think of a world where that doesn't happen to him. Like, what would he have done? Say like Alex Ferguson's son got the Manchester United job, and Darren Ferguson was manager and still was manager, and this was just an alternate universe that just never came up.
What job does Moyes get?
Yeah, like, where would his career have gone?
England job.
Does possibly the England job?
Do you know?
Did he get the England job to the Scottish man?
No, yeah, I think so. I mean, they gave it to Sweden, they gave it to Italians.
Fair point.
I think he would have got it ahead of Big Sam, maybe.
Possibly. That, like, does David Moyes then get a phone call from a journalist being like, "You want to go for a pint of wine, mate?" And does he then indulge in a pint of wine?
No, he does everything Gareth Southgate's doing, because he's probably a better manager than Gareth Southgate.
Yes,
yeah. So,
that's the sliding doors.
That is an interesting alternate universe that we've just invented this morning. I see your point, right? That these are all managers of a fairly similar level, and at some point maybe one of the top 4 clubs gives them an opportunity. It's just, I'm not sure. You know, Moyes was obviously never getting the Liverpool gig. If he didn't get the United gig, he didn't get that. So does he turn Spurs into a top 4 club if he gets their money at some point over that period of time? Do they take him from Everton? Maybe they do. Maybe they were big enough. Did Chelsea give him a crack? I'm not sure. He's an Abramovich. He doesn't have the identity of an Abramovich manager, does he? He's not like...
That feels weird, Moyes in the Chelsea dugout. But then again, so does Moyes in the Manchester United dugout, and that's something that actually happened. Well, that just seems so bizarre that was a real thing.
It didn't feel that weird at the time when you think about it. Like, the anointed successor was, for whatever reason, a failure. So, I don't know.
So the roundabout point here is that write Brendan Rodgers off at your peril, I think, or write any manager who has shown glimpses of excellence off at your peril, because football is like, and especially in that area of the Premier League where you are fighting to get into the top 6, you're going to lose games that you're expected to win sometimes. You're going to lose games in dramatic fashion. Like, there is, if we're talking about alternate universes, you don't have to go into the realms of a lack of reality too quickly to think about what would happen if Leicester had beaten Spurs last night. They easily could have done it. And
they could have, right? But, and I'm not overreacting to one result, it's just that there's been a pattern where he hasn't achieved the things he's supposed to achieve when it's right there for them to achieve those things, like including qualifying for the Champions League last year. After they won the Cup, it felt like it was right there for them, and they, for whatever reason, couldn't get it done. And there's been just a series where injuries, whatever, fair enough, but they had a good team out last night, and it was a big game. Shifty Lad says, lads, what about the Super Spurs? Look at the table. How did they end up there playing those amount of matches? And Bobby Dwyer says, Conte genius, Rangnick spoofer. Spurs, Leicester, never in doubt.
But like, if we're talking about the top 4 managers, there's no question who is pushed himself into the top 4, or who is in the top 4, and it is Antonio Conte. And like, as we said yesterday on Deal or No Deal, it's Chelsea who are looking over their shoulder at Tottenham at the moment, never mind West Ham. I think Tottenham are certainly going to finish in the top 4 at the season, unless there is a ridiculous twist in the Harry Kane tale over the next 10 days where he just gets swooped, where somebody swoops in for him. But I'm sure behind the scenes, like, I mean, as Ranieri said yesterday, if players are playing for to get out in the summer, all fair on that front. I wonder, are Spurs having... I'm sure they're not having similar conversations with Harry Kane. He's too important, too talismanic. But if there is a little bit of a symbiotic nature to their relationship right now, where it's like, you can kick us into the Champions League places with your goals this season, and we will be more receptive to a £150 million offer in the summer, then go for it, Harry Kane. Be our guest.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that the window is either shut or it's now. Will he move in the summer before the World Cup that he thinks he's going to lift the trophy at? I'm not sure. Maybe he will. I don't know. Maybe it's the perfect thing to go to Man City and retire a little bit for 3 or 4 months, and then go off and win the World Cup and then come back. Maybe. It's hard to get inside the mind of Harry Kane. It's 7:42 this morning here on OTB AM, brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. We'll keep you up to date on how things are going at the Australian Open. Andy Murray's on court for his second round against a qualifier. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. Daniel Harris is going to join us in just a moment. We've got Cian Tracey talking about the Ireland squad. A very interesting Ireland squad in many respects, and kind of not that interesting in other aspects, but neither of the Byrne brothers made the cut for this section. Now, it's possible he will call up replacements, but Joey Carbery's in the squad, and that's a good sign. Ian Henderson's in the squad, and that's a good sign, so they expect them both to play something over the course of the tournament. But we will see Jack Carty. We will definitely see Jack Carty play some minutes in the Six Nations. So we'll talk with Cian Tracey about that. We'll also bring you the sports pages, sports news with John Duggan. And then after that, we've got hurling power rankings for the first time this season. Louise Quinn's going to join us around about 9:10. It's been a topsy-turvy season, a little bit more turvy than topsy for Birmingham, but we'll talk about the Republic of Ireland as well. And then we'll bring you some more rugby chat from around about 8:30. If you want to get in touch, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Very quickly, some breaking news from the Irish Independent this morning is that Paul Galvin is going to be a member of the Kildare backroom team, which is obviously keeping alive the Kerry connection that went when Jack O'Connor left. But this is a good move by Kildare. I'm pretty excited about this.
Yeah, because it's interesting that's what you say. I was going to ask you, like, how do you feel about this? It feels that with Paul Galvin, we just nobody knows right now, or the jury's still out on what he can do.
Well, I think when you listen to him talk about Gaelic football in any depth, it's clear there is a deep thinking going on about positions, body position when you have the ball, how to attack defences, and he's had a long time to think about this. So I'd really love to have seen what would have happened at Wexford if he'd been given, the opportunity, and because it certainly, he injected a level of interest and intrigue into that job, and it didn't feel like the county board got as fully behind him. Certainly that was one of the things that came out afterwards, so that's not going to be the case here.
It's the number one sport. It helps if you're not playing second fiddle to, so that's what I mean. Like, we didn't actually get to see this project play out for Paul Galvin, and while he is one of the most famous faces in Gaelic games of modern times, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's necessarily best as the face of a coaching ticket. Maybe he is going to turn out to be one of the best thinkers behind the scenes as a coach who's not actually the manager of a team. Maybe that's how it works out. He'll find that out. Kildare will find that out over the next little while. But maybe, as these things tend to go, maybe it's just a progression into a top gig once again over the next little while. Again, we just didn't see enough from Wexford to know whether or not this is a guaranteed success or not. But it's the Kildare Managed Studio here is excited for what's going to happen.
Oh yeah, totally. It's just they're putting together a coaching ticket where there's going to be a lot of bodies around who add levels of thinking to the brains trust, and if this doesn't work, then they've tried their best. Really, all I want is that the notion is that everybody's trying their best, that they're exhausting every bit of coaching and every bit of tactics and every bit of investment that they possibly can to make the team as good as they can. And at that point, it's like, well, if a better team beats you, fair enough, but That's how it feels. And the fact that this is somebody coming in is grand because the management team is actually deeply embedded in the culture of the county. Whereas
made the decision.
Whereas in previous years, in previous years, it's been like, let's get somebody in from outside who, as we see, as soon as a better offer comes along, is out the door. Which, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's not a...
Can't turn down Manchester United.
Well, that's not a first world... We're not a first world thing. It's like, well, we can't ever aspire to be one because... No, sorry. Somebody else came calling.
Did we ever decide who worse, Kildare in that analogy?
I don't really want to. Sorry. Why are you bullying me like this, Owen?
Or RB Leipzig, is it?
7:46 this morning here on OTB AM. Let's turn to the actual Manchester United. I'm glad to say Daniel Harris is with us. Daniel, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. This is we were just saying earlier, it's a bit like Manchester United's season was played out in 90 minutes last night, where an excellent performance / bad finishing keeps them in it. There's a sliver of hope from one of the young players. Bruno's brilliant in a patch. There's a petulant bit of a row between Ronaldo and the manager, and they win the game. It was kind of just this weird encapsulation of absolutely everything that's going on. So what did you make of that bizarre sequence of events that we saw last night?
Yeah, it was kind of bizarre, but not bizarre, because we've seen it before. It was a very Solskjaer performance, that. United weren't behind at half-time, but they were dreadful in the first half. We've seen that a lot. And then they found a way in the second half because they've got good players. And it was like, I think that the last couple of games have been a bit better. Apart from the first 20 minutes, half hour against Palace, United have been pretty much dreadful uniformly under Rangnick. But the first half hour against Villa, they looked more like a team that knew what they were doing. And last night they played pretty well in the second half. And again, it looked like they had some kind of plan about what to do. And the manager, in fairness, he got the team right. He made a difference at half time. He made a change that worked okay. So, and the same, obviously you've got to criticise the way they played in the first half. It's totally unacceptable and maybe the worst yet. But they found a way to turn it around. But obviously they need to find some level of consistency now. But I think one thing that is good and will hopefully start to have an impact is there's a bit of competition for places now. Under Ole, that wasn't really the case, but because he had his 11, it wasn't entirely his fault. He didn't want to change them because he didn't like the other players. Whereas now, Maguire's been dropped and he's not getting that place back until Lindelof makes a mistake. So Lindelof knows he's got to play well, and Maguire knows he's got to train properly, and if he gets in, he'll have to play well. And then there's also competition for places up front now because Elanga's come in and done well. There's no need to take him out. And Greenwood scored last night, Rashford scored last night, and Sancho wasn't even there. So tentatively, things are improving slightly, but you never know with these players because one thing you do know about them is you cannot trust them.
You can't trust them, but you can begin to see that a bit of structure and a bit of coaching will lead to better things over a period of time. I have a little bit of sympathy for Rangnick, where you come in and you try and inject something that hasn't been there and it doesn't happen straight away. People are like, well, you're not going to be here long term. If you think back to Klopp's arrival, they weren't very good in the first 3, 4, 5 months. There was loads of players got injured, performances were patchy, they would lose games where they really should have won, they would draw games they would draw games they should have won. They would
we get it.
Exactly.
We get it.
Yeah, and so it's very difficult to just come in mid-season and go, right, this is fixed.
100%. I mean, I think the difference with Klopp, obviously, is that he'd won the Bundesliga and he'd got to Champions League final. So he was someone in whom it was easy to have confidence because you knew he was brilliant. Maybe you didn't know quite how brilliant, but if you'd paid any attention to football over the preceding years, you knew that he was a very special manager and a very special person. Rangnick's slightly different in that if United are as good as the best team he's ever managed, that won't be enough. And so he's done really well, but he's done really well with smaller clubs. And what he's done has been, he may have inspired a generation of German coaches with a particular style of football, but he's never imposed that style of football at the highest level, the very highest level. And Klopp had done that. And I think that's the difference. It's not possible to have total faith in Rangnick, even though he speaks really well. I think the way his inability to extract an immediate bounce was quite troubling, because you would expect, just United couldn't have been playing any worse under Ole than they were, and they didn't. They stopped tossing goals in all over the place under Rangnick, which was a difference, but that was more or less the only difference. It didn't get much better otherwise, and that wasn't really what I was expecting. Not even any great faith in Rangnick, just that when you bring a new manager into that kind of mess, you would expect Neil Warnock to make it better, just by virtue of not being the old guy and just getting the players focused and concentrated again. And that didn't really happen. But slowly, as I said, the last couple of games have been better. And although Klopp's not a great example, because I also think Rangnick's got better players than Klopp had at the beginning, it doesn't necessarily have to happen immediately. And as long as there are signs of improvement, there'll always be hope. And I mean, I know he joked about it when he took the job, but I'm sure Rangnick fancies keeping this job. And if that's going to happen, he'll need to get a lot better quickly. And that actually leaves him in a bit of a quandary, because on the one hand, he's the guy who's meant to keep it warm, find the right next guy, and then be a consultant. So in theory, he should be able to plan for the future, except if he wants his future to be actually the permanent manager, he needs to get results now. And I think there's perhaps a slight conflict between those two aspects.
Rangnick and his in-game management has been interesting over the last little while. He said last night that it was the right decision to make the changes that he did, and I think he's given himself a bit of credit over the previous games as well. Is he right to be so generous to himself? Has it worked in a way that Solskjaer didn't manage to make it work in terms of making the correct subs within the game?
I mean, Ole sometimes made it work, sometimes didn't make it work. And when you're not getting results, it always looks worse when you try something that doesn't come off. I thought Rangnick got it wrong against Villa, and he admitted that he didn't do anything to protect the lead that United had, really. He just changed the striker, but very late on. And if you see a team like United, who mentally are quite weak ultimately, what happened against Villa was they stopped doing what they'd been doing during the game that had got them to 2-0. And perhaps they're not fit enough to press for 90 minutes. But if they're going to sit off, then Rangnick should know that the defence he has is not sufficiently reliable to expect to see out a 2-1 in particular against a team that you're basically allowing to pass into midfield every time, and the crowd are up and it's all going off. And I think he admitted that he got that wrong, because what he said last night was that he brought Maguire on for Ronaldo because if they're going to protect what they had, and he said he didn't do it in the last game. So yeah, he learned from his mistake, and it also seems now like he's settled on a way of playing, which is also one of the reasons it's been so disjointed till now. He's played the 4-2-2-2, he's played 4-2-3-1, he's played 3-5-2, he's played 4-3-3, and it now looks like he's more or less settled on some kind of 4-3-3 with McTominay as the holder, but able to come forward, and Fred and Bruno in front of him. And I think that I would always felt like 4-2-3-1 was the only way that might work with this team, given its deficiencies in midfield. But there's not really a massive difference between 4-3-3 and 4-2-3-1, and this way seems to be working at the moment. It remains to be seen what happens when you play a quality team, a really good team, if you can get away without having two men in front of the back four, and Fred's so high. But if they can get the pressing right, then they can defend from the front, and that was the thing that they lost against Villa. They stopped defending from the front, but they also stopped defending in midfield and stopped defending in defence, and that was why they got caught in the way that they did. So last night was definitely an improvement, but you won't usually get away with conceding as many big chances in a half as they did in the first half.
Ronaldo getting taken off is probably a little bit overblown, but Rangnick was talking about it afterwards and says he asked, "Why did you take me off?" I told him I have to make decisions in the interest of the team and the club. And then he said, when we scored a third, I said this exactly to him: "I know you're ambitious to score, but maybe in 2 years' time, when you are a head coach like me in the same position, you'll understand." Ronaldo in 2 years' time, the idea of him not playing is probably something that feels poisonous to Cristiano Ronaldo himself.
Yeah, it's just I can't believe people are making a fuss about that. Ronaldo bitched when he got sent off 10 years ago. He's still the same person now. And most players don't like to be taken off. And I guess he feels he has the status to show that. Now, you either say, well, that's completely unacceptable, or you say, well, that's who this bloke is. He's got some credit in the bank. You know, I'd be out the Champions League if it wasn't for him. And really, like, who cares? It was done and dusted in, 30 seconds. He showed his aggravation. It's an emotional game. He's behaved he showed an emotional reaction. I can't believe we're talking about it, but to me, I saw it happen and I forgot about it until people started wailing about it subsequently, because it happens all the time.
Well, it is, except it doesn't happen to Ronaldo all the time. It felt like it would have been unusual enough for Solskjaer to do it. I think maybe did it happen once over the course.
Yeah, he left him out. He left him out against Everton. I think he'd taken him off as well. Did he take him off against Young Boys? I mean, I can't remember. I think he might have done.
I guess the point is, I actually think it's not a bad thing that Rangnick is capable of doing this, and then coming out afterwards and just having a conversation and kind of killing the thing. Whereas, do you remember there was the whole Ronaldo storm down the not the touchline, the tunnel after, because he doesn't respect, and it just felt a little bit like Rangnick is actually the boss. There's a grown up in the room.
He's Rangnick is honest, and he's a straight talker. I don't know. I mean, there have been stories that he's not particularly appealing to the players, but yeah, he seems to be quite honest about what he thinks about a game, what he thinks about what's going on. I mean, I'd be amazed if there was any bad feeling about that. And I found it quite odd that it was something that the media chose to focus on. I mean, I say that I'm part of the media. Well, it never occurred to me that would be something worth focusing on. You've just seen a really entertaining game of football, lots of stuff to talk about. And if we're talking about anyone losing their head, then we're talking about Thomas Frank totally losing the noggin, his noggin falling off and then booting it down the street. If that's really what we're going to talk about.
I quite enjoyed that, I've got to say. I like that.
Oh, it's tremendous.
I mean, it was kind of Keegan-esque, but you want someone to be bitter and annoyed after a match like that. Before we get
I thought it got a bit weird when he started talking about Jadon Sancho at that point, where he starts talking about Jadon Sancho. They've got a £70 million player who didn't even play when he's attending a family funeral, and United's 3 goals were scored by academy products. That was a bit weird. We've got a quick minute. It was all the self-righteousness of it all was a bit odd, and not just because he's a 47-year-old man with curtains. I can see him being a manager of a top 4 club because of the self-righteousness. That will appeal, I think, to the oligarchs and the billionaires. One last point, Anthony Elanga, in 60 seconds for us here. What's the future? Because you've been talking about him on the show for a long time now, Daniel, and it's coming to fruition. Yeah, he's someone you knew Ole loved him because he talked about him all the time. And one of the things you can see about Elanga is that and we heard about it. He said it last night, but he just must have been brilliant in training, because he had been picked without having actually done that much on the pitch or anything. And then but everyone knew he was good, but he must have been training his arse off. And he's got what I like about him, and I think I said this before, is that he's got the knack of a centre forward and the agility of a winger. And he's got amazing dedication. I'd like to see a little bit more from him in general play, linking the play. But in terms of running behind, he's got skill, he's got vision, he's got a brain, he's got instinct. I mean, yeah, he's a player. And he, as Rangnick said before he dropped him last night, I mean, I felt that he was going to play him against Villa, and I felt like he wouldn't drop him because he'd done enough to hang on to the shirt, and that remains the case. And that means that Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho have got to fight for their shirts, and Mason Greenwood's got to fight for his shirt, because he knows that he's got 2 other quality players up his arse, and that's the kind of thing that you want and that you need in a team. I think at some point we might see, I don't think it'll be this season, see Greenwood move into the middle, and then you see a front 3, say Elanga, Greenwood, Sancho, or Rashford, and you've got those 4 to choose from, and you've got a lot of flexibility there. You've got athleticism, you've got intelligence, and you've got people who know that if they don't get paid, if they don't play well, they won't get picked. And Elanga's interview afterwards was really lovely as well, where he just spoke really honestly in a classic, also one of the greatest Jan Molby non-English accents I've ever heard, and it was just extremely wholesome. He felt like someone who wants to be a professional footballer, and he understands what it takes to be a professional footballer, and he's going to do everything that it takes to be a professional footballer. And no player in the history of the world ever made it to the top on talent alone. Like, you have to abuse yourself in terms of how hard you're prepared to work. And I think that is a lesson for a lot of the other players in that team as well, because you look at Mason Greenwood, he's an amazing talent, but he plays like someone who's always been the best at every single level, has turned up in the Premier League and thought, oh, pretty good here as well. And Elanga is someone who also has that level of ability, maybe not quite the ability of Greenwood, but you can see that he's going to get everything out of it because he's going to work as hard as it's possible to work.
Yeah.
And that is something that should not be lost on any single player in that squad.
No, and I'm sure that it won't be. Daniel, great stuff. Thanks a million.
Have a good day, everyone. See you again, guys.
Cheers,
Bye.
take care. That's Daniel Harris there, who's off to take over the Guardian live blog on the Australian Open. Jonathan, who says the media expose themselves for who they are, blowing up this non-situation between Ronaldo and Ralph. Ralph explained it in the press conference and he was asked about it 3 times afterwards. I mean, the most famous footballer in the world, the most followed human being on social media, having a little petulance drop becomes an issue, right? But actually, I thought Ranić dealt with it quite well.
I thought it was very interesting. Like I wouldn't have expected, say, Maurizio Pochettino, when he takes Lionel Messi off at the start of the season, to turn around to him and say, "You'll understand in a couple of years when you're a head coach." Like, I mean, it's quite paternalistic, but it's also kind of funny.
Well, it is, and I'm not sure that's necessarily going to work. But he is definitely the boss, right? And that's all that needs to happen, is there someone needs to be the boss.
Yeah, like, I think, I mean, maybe asking 3 times is a bit much, but it's absolutely something you ask about in the press conference afterwards.
But everybody has to do their own. They want their voice on the question, so that when they clip it for social later on, it sounds like, I'm the one who asked the question.
Yes.
And also, you know that he gets more and more annoyed and gives a slightly different answer each time. That's how that works. David says, Ralph isn't a spoofer, but he is being asked to clear out the squad, but maintain the squad value, find a new manager and get a top 4 position. It's an impossible job. It may well be an impossible job. And Neil says, a lot of Spurs fans left before the 93rd minute. You would be sickened. I mean, I don't know what my UK geography is. My English geography is terrible. So is it 2.5 hours, 2 hours from Leicester to London? I don't know.
You also don't know the train times. It's another thing that you're...
I don't, and as far as I know...
there are no trains.
Exactly. The trains have been gutted by the Tories over the last 3 decades. They've, maybe for nights like this.
It's always been a thing, isn't it? Every away day is just tainted by lack of trains. Just something that we just don't have our finger on the pulse on that front over here. But I'm sure. Let's not give them a break. I mean, it's an absolute disgrace that they left it at 2-1.
We gutted our trains in the 1930s.
Yeah, well,
we don't want those.
Don't.
Well, who wants trams? What's the point of these things? They're old and anachronistic. Let's concrete over them.
Don't say that to anyone from Donegal. Obviously, there was nothing to gut.
There was.
Oh, there was. Donegal got got sorry, and then
they had loads of trains.
Okay, sorry.
It was like, no, we don't need these. Let's
it's the modern day.
Let's put some tarmac over it.
It's the same in parts of the west as well, where there's all these rundown train tracks that just aren't used anymore. It's a bit of a shame.
Maybe we could turn them into a greenway. It's 2 minutes past 8. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Is Greenway not the name of a director, and Greenway is what I was trying to say?
No, I got it. I think you're absolutely right. I think that's actually what is happening. I mean, you're ahead of the game there. You're going to be cycling on these railway tracks.
Hopefully. Stephen Somerville has been in touch. Says, seeing Jack Carty in there is a relief, as he has been the one who has stepped up big time in games for Connacht. Now he can hopefully step up when it comes to Ireland. It's a big test for him. The world is littered with players who got into the team, came out of the team, went away, licked their wounds, worked on the game and came back ready to go, and particularly in his position and particularly at his age. But how bad was the situation originally? How bad was the thing that he's been labelled with since it happened, scapegoated for, I would say, purposely by anyway, it seems like it was a handy scapegoat to this guy. We didn't have Sexton. And we did have Sexton for the New Zealand game. That didn't really work out, did it? So anyway, the Japan game, Eoin, you've been going back doing PhD level analysis of this.
Yeah. Watched all 60 minutes of Jack Carty's time on the pitch yesterday from the Japan game, the second game of the Rugby World Cup in 2019. And spoiler alert, if you're scapegoating Jack Carty for this defeat, you're barking up the wrong tree completely. Doesn't mean, though, that he's completely absolved of blame. And I think Andy Dunn put it succinctly yesterday when he said in attack he was good, in defence maybe not so good. So went back through the game. The game is available on YouTube for anybody who wants to put themselves through that level of self-torture after the show this morning. And I've just picked out a couple of moments as we go chronologically through the story of Jack Carty in the second game of the Rugby World Cup in 2019. So in the first minute we see Jack Carty with a couple of reverse passes, Ireland taking the ball straight into contact, as you'd expect under Joe Schmidt. If this was any other Joe Schmidt player, you'd expect them to carry the ball into contact, but in this situation Jack Carty puts it to boot in behind the Japanese line. There's no one there to pick it up for Ireland, and there is no real kick chase there. As you can see, there's plenty of bodies behind the ball on the right wing, and nobody's making anything of that, but it shows the early intent from Jack Harty that he's not going to take the ball into contact. He's going to kick behind the line. Whether or not that's an actual tactic instructed to Jack Harty at that moment, it's hard to tell. So that's in the very first minute of the game. You'll remember that Jack Carty kind of started this game like a house on fire. Over the next little while then there is a little bit of a warning sign from Japan where they get in behind the Irish line through a grubber kick. Stockdale gets a little bit lucky versus Matsushima. Maybe Japan could have taken a lead early on in that game. And then in the 9th minute, Carty has his hands on the ball for a penalty. You can see Conor Murray facing the other way. I think what the Ireland players are electing to do here is to go for touch to the left. So this is to the left of the posts, and that will be the conventional thing to do, to go to the left. But Jack Carty actually takes the ball and goes quick, and he tries to go for Keith Earls on the right hand side. It's way too wide for Keith Earls, and as we'll see, he tries to make an acrobatic lunge towards the line, but he's absolutely nowhere near it. Not Keith Earls' fault, maybe not Jack Carty's fault either, but really what he should have been doing is going for the left corner if he was playing by the Joe Schmidt rules. I would say that Joe Schmidt would have been fuming from that incident in particular. It's one that I actually completely forgot about, and Japan end up winning their own line out, clearing their own ball, and it's at the halfway line instead of Ireland having their own line out in the corner. So that kind of perhaps sums up maybe one of the first things that went out of line at the start. Then in the 11th minute, Ireland are into the opposition half. Carty drops back, goes for the corner, is well away from it. He had Kearney outside of him, and there was a change on the left Japan wing before the game. The commentators are picking this up, and immediately after that there's a simple pass to get Ireland out wide on the left. There's not so much space, and Ireland get 3 consecutive offloads out of their hands at the moment, which is something again that I'd totally forgotten. The commentators at this point are saying that the move was a little bit too open for Joe Schmidt's liking. That was more offloads than they had in the entirety of the game against Scotland. So as we can see, we're into the 14th minute here for Ireland. This is a free play. Ball is popped back to Carty, who goes to the right one more time, and this is up for Gary Ringrose, who ends up scoring a try. But again, the key point here is that this is a free play. My recollection of things was that Jack Carty was just getting the ball in open play and popping the ball around, as he did on occasion. But the 2 tries that Ireland score in the first half are from Jack Carty and from free shots, essentially. What we then have is, if we move this on to the 20th minute, is Jack Carty getting ball off the line out. He goes with a big pass out to the left hand side to Stockdale, who gets tackled on the 5 metre line. Ireland go through a couple of more phases, and Carty gets the ball into his hands again, closer to the posts, but it's penalty Ireland. It's another free hit. Carty on this occasion goes high with the ball, gets himself on the ball again with the up and under, taps it down to Rob Carty, and it's try time again for Ireland. So Ireland have got 2 tries on the board after 21 minutes. Carty's converted one of them. The second one was a pretty easy conversion, and Ireland have got both of their tries off free hits, essentially. I don't think Sexton would have done anything different in those occasions, and I don't think Carty is stepping out of line too much, with the exception of the Keith Earls effort at the start.
I mean, that was absolutely keeping everybody honest. It meant that. Is there any possibility that it was designed? First penalty you get, go for crossfield kick. We've got Keith Earls, he's really fast, he's very athletic. You're a great kicker, we're going to try this. What we're going to do is we're going to make everybody fake it, that you're just going to kick to the corner. But just be aware. And obviously, you would hope that the rest of the team, the Irish team, responds to, this guy, he's going to put me in space every opportunity he gets. I'm on the far wing, and he's thinking, I've got Earlsy here. I think that's great.
And as I said there as well, the commentators are talking about this change on that Japanese wing. This was clearly a plan. I would say that if you broke it down, the amount of times that Carty kicks to the right as opposed to the left is huge. If you move things on then to the 23rd minute, the ball is passed out to Carty from the restart. He kicks crossfield to Earls again, and the ball is passed into Kearney from Earls, and Ireland are well inside the Japan half. So again, this is that tactic again. Jack Carty gets the ball out to the right to Keith Earls. So maybe it didn't work out at the start, and maybe he should have gone for the corner because it was a penalty, but on this occasion it works out quite well, and Ireland have got good yards rather than the hard yards that they tended to make under Joe Schmidt. Then we get into the area about, I guess, some of the defensive work, and there was a moment in the 27th minute where he jumps off the line to tackle Matsushima, but he ends up going backwards, and already at this point, this is the 27th minute, the commentators make the point that Ireland have missed more tackles in this game alone than they have against Scotland. And just to be clear, that's not Jack Carty who's missing tackles. He finishes up with 3 missed tackles in this game. It's the second highest, in fairness. Gary Ringrose finished with 4, but there's a number who finished on a pair of missed tackles. But already by the 27th minute, they've missed more tackles than in the entirety of the Scotland game. And then a couple of minutes later, he shoved back into tackle again. But in the 31st minute, what we have here is a pretty key moment of the first half where Rory Best drastically overthrows an Ireland line out. As we can see it there, it's well over James Ryan's arms at that point. And then it's a hugely dominant collision for Japan. If we roll this on one more, which Jack Carty is involved in, they go down Carty's alley here, and we can see that he's in a bit of bother. Then Carty, a couple of minutes later, Ireland do manage to turn that ball over. He carries the ball into a double collision, and the ball spills. Ireland do get lucky on this occasion because the Japan man knocked it forward in contact. But this is the pivotal moment of the entire game right before half-time. This is
sloppiness.
It's a sloppiness, but it's also
a set piece.
Well, sorry, yes.
From the forwards.
100%. And there's a moment in the second half as well where there's an absolutely terrible line-out throw once again. And that was bread and butter under Joe Schmidt, and that had broken down badly. But to kind of push forward that point again, the 35th minute, even though this is an Ireland scrum, I think everybody remembers this moment. This was the key moment in the game, it felt. Ireland lose the scrum against the head. Now, Michael Leach had come off the bench at this point, and I mean the Japanese scrum was potentially a little bit stronger than Ireland thought it would be at this point. But losing a scrum against the head, I can remember the stadium was absolutely rocking at this point. Japan go down the pitch and score another penalty, and it's 9-12 at half time at this point. And Carty's restart, in fairness, does go over the try line from that moment, and Japan get a scrum at the halfway line and almost score another try before half time. So things are just going completely haywire for Ireland at this point, whether or not it's all in the set piece or whether or not it's all in Jack Carty. I think there's enough blame to go around at this point. We quickly then just run through some of the moments in the second half. He only plays 20 minutes of the second half. In the 42nd minute, he gets a ball off a scrum. He immediately finds his touch pretty well, going for territory this time. I think there's been a bit of a shift in the second half. It seems like it was a bit of a direct instruction actually from Schmidt at half time. And then in the 50th minute, he goes for another corner after the scrum penalty. But this is where Ireland lose another line out, and just a complete disaster in this area once again, where it could have been try time once again for Ireland.
So what we've had is a lost line out, a lost scrum, and a lost line-out.
Yes.
The malfunctioning has happened in the forwards over in the championship minutes either side of half-time.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in fairness, if we go back to like the 50th
it's Jack Carty's fault, everybody. I hope you're paying attention, because you get the quiz to this and you go, whose fault was the World Cup? Jack Carty. But actually, what happened was the forwards completely disintegrated here.
Yeah, exactly. And like we saw on screen there, the image from the 50th minute where the location is. Like, should that be going between the posts, or is, like, if Sexton has that ball in his hands, is he also going for the corner? Like, I'm not saying it's Carty making this call. Like, I mean, it's not a gimme especially for a right footer, that's for sure. And I just wonder at this point, do they think to themselves, we are going to be able to still beat Japan up once we get our maul going off the line out, and it's absolutely going to be try time, and forgetting about the fact that actually their line out had already malfunctioned once in the first half, and getting that maul going is not necessarily a gimme. And also their scrum, they lost the scrum penalty against the head. So you get the sense watching this game that Ireland thought they were going to physically have the upper hand against Japan, and I reckon that was actually part of a factor in selecting Jack Harty from the first place. Like we see in his defensive positioning, he is behind the line for Ireland, whereas if Sexton's playing, he's in the line for Ireland and he's making the tackles. Jack Carty, as I say, misses 3 tackles across the game. I don't think I reckon they felt they didn't need the physicality at 10 throughout this game, which maybe suggests a wider sense of complacency going into this game. If we move then on to just a couple of the last few minutes, then if we move into the 53rd minute, we get a good view from behind the goal of where Carty is in defence, as I say, well behind the line. And then a couple of seconds later, after this ruck, an aerial ball goes up from Japan. As you can see, Carty is due to get under it, but he actually spills the ball. It's a knock on. What we have though is then a couple of seconds later, O'Mahony's off his feet in the same play, and it's a penalty for Japan rather than a scrum for Japan. Tamura does miss it, and this is where Peter O'Mahony gets taken off. Rhys Ruddock comes on, and he had a bad day at the office that day. I think it's fair to say I think O'Mahony would have got sin-binned were it not for him getting substituted by Rhys Ruddock at that point. But I mean, the hits just keep on coming for Jack Harty. A couple of minutes later, then he slides off a tackle, as we can I think see in these next collection of images, and you can just see they're targeting Carty at times here, running straight into his direction at this point, and I think the player just kind of bounces off him. We can see the yards that Japan make off this particular contact.
He's a big L unit.
He is a big unit, and Carty just kind of slides off, and I think there's one more image there just to kind of show. So like you can see why people make the case that Jack Carty had a couple of bad moments in defence that day. I'm absolutely not saying that whatsoever, that he had a good day defensively. And then the last thing just to mention then is, like, right after this, Chris Farrell runs straight into CJ Stander after receiving a pass off him inside their own 22. and it's a scrum for Japan inside Ireland's 22, and Japan score from the resulting play in the left corner. It's just between the scrum against the head, 2 line outs, Chris Farrell running into CJ Stander, they are pivotal moments that either stopped Ireland from scoring or gifting Japan scores themselves. And then come the 59th minute, you've got Joey Carberry with the ball in his hands, and Jack Harty has been substituted off. Alright,
so that's the deep dive on, but we're going to see him again in the Six Nations because he's in the squad. He's recovered from that, and he's recovered from being scapegoated, even though it was actually a much wider systems malfunction problem that we had. A quick update on what's going on in the world. Shane Lowry's teed off in round 1 of the Abu Dhabi HSBC Championship. So he's got a 25-yard putt for birdie in the first. The Kyrgios Medvedev is about to get underway at the Australian Open. Catherine Murphy's been tweeting from the court saying Kyrgios has plenty of fans in the Rod Laver Arena. They're already doing that Cristiano Ronaldo celebration, which sounds like booing. The players aren't even on court yet. Get ready to hear booing when they arrive. We don't know why the Kyrgios sue adaptation, the fans. We don't know. We'll get to the bottom of that before the end of the tournament. Andy Murray lost the first set though. He is 1 set down and 3-2 down in the second set. I think that's on serve though, so we'll keep you up to date on that as the show progresses. We're going to take a quick break. Still to come, the hurling power rankings, which have a little bit of controversy in them, from Louise Quinn, Republic of Ireland defender. Up next, rugby with Cian Tracey.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
He's a Lion, he's a Grand Slam winner, he's Ireland's leading try scorer, and now you can hear him first, exclusively on the OTB Sports app.
One of my abiding memories is having my cut opened up again as I got hit by the trophy in coppers on the dance floor.
Join Brian O'Driscoll for the best insight and analysis this rugby season.
We haven't had the usual kind of grenades from Gats, that's gone, so we're creating them ourselves.
Get the jump on everyone else. Download the OTB Sports app and turn on notifications now.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB Sports Radio.
We've got a panel who know a thing or two about being trailblazers.
Paul Rouse. Sport was already kind of impeded upon.
Sinead Kassan.
There's an innate interest in it anyway.
Dermot Ling. It didn't blow me away with him. Jason Sherlock and Kieran Donaghy with us.
Basketball would have been my main game.
Retro panel for you now.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Retro Panel. Wednesdays and Thursdays from 4.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
At 17 minutes past 8, you're very welcome back to OTB AM. We're live every morning in association with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent is with us this morning. Cian, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Hey lads, I was good until I saw Owen's deep dive of Shizuoka again, and now I'm brought back there.
PTSD.
Yeah, absolutely. I was there as well, and memories coming flooding back. Yeah, as great as an occasion it was, we're still talking about Jack Harty's day there. It's kind of mad.
Yeah, and I think the point of us bringing this up is not to rain on Jack Harty. It's actually to say this wasn't his fault. It was like there was a load of other things that were going on, and it's weird that it has all been kind of hung on a few individual shoulders when really there were many. It was a nice pie of blame that everybody should have had a little slice of in the aftermath. Carty's back. That's the headline from yesterday, which he really deserves. And it is one of those kind of great Irish sports comeback stories over the last couple of years. It looks almost certain he's going to get some game time, and fairly significant game time over the course of the Six Nations.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, he's there on merit. I think the biggest surprise perhaps is that Joey Carberry is named there. Obviously, he's out injured at the moment, so he'd be obviously hard pushed to make it back to be on the bench for the Wales game. So I think Carberry's in pole position to be back up to Johnny Sexton. I think as soon as Carberry comes back and gets some decent training time under his belt, I think you'll see the lineup change there again. But yeah, like it's a great story of resilience. I think one of the things as well that kind of gets overlooked in the Jack Harty 2019 World Cup saga is that the succession planning around out half was so poor. Like Jack Harty had only made his debut for Ireland in that Six Nations, and suddenly then he was propelled. Now he did get about 7 caps maybe. World Cup warm-up games off the bench in Italy was his debut. But then to be propelled into a game against Japan, against the hosts in what was like an incredible atmosphere, he wasn't really prepared for that. So I think lessons probably have to be learned. It was similar to 2015. You remember when Ian Madigan, as well as he did when he came off the bench in the France game, in the last pool game in 2015, it came unstuck. It wasn't his fault either in a quarter-final against Argentina. So you'd hope that lessons have been learned in terms of the succession planning. I think, you know, we all want to see Harry Byrne come through, but you just can't pick a guy who has so few minutes under his belt. But it's clear that Andy Farrell, I think all things being equal, Andy Farrell sees his 3 out halves as Johnny Sexton, Joey Carberry and Harry Byrne. But this is, I suppose, shot at redemption for Jack Carty. He hasn't played since Andy Farrell has taken over, which is a long time, and Andy Farrell has had a lot of time to look at him. I think Carty getting called up at the final week in November last year was really important, because while he didn't play, he got a taste for camp. He saw how things were done under Andy Farrell and Mike Catt, and went away, and you can see his performances for Connacht. So yeah, it's well deserved. And you know, if he does get in and Johnny Sexton picks up an injury and Jack Harty goes well, it's massive for Ireland, it's massive for him. So yeah, fingers crossed he can go well now.
There's a real sign as well that if you are actually playing well, if you're doing the stuff that the coaching ticket asks you to do, we're going to pick you, as opposed to, we have the succession plan in place, we all know Harry Byrne's going to make it eventually, and we're just shooing him in. That hasn't happened in this instance. And you would have to assume that that's a really good thing for those players who are on the fringes, who are on the outside at the moment looking in thinking, I should be in there. But actually, there's now a pathway. Play really well, nail down your position, be the number one in your position for your province, and we'll put you in.
Yeah, and to be fair, that was probably one of the criticisms I and a lot of other people would have had at the end of Joe Schmidt's tenure, that, you know, the team was as is, and it was very hard to break that. I think when you dig deeper into the Ireland squad, you can see the core of what Andy Farrell wants to bring to France next year at the World Cup. But there's no doubt that there are still a few places up for grabs, and you are going to have a few bolters. There's so much time left between now and next autumn. But yeah, it does send out a good message. And, you know, I think the way Ireland played last year, with the attack finally clicking and how they were trying to play, I think that's much more married up to how Connacht are playing at the moment. Now, I'm not underestimating how big the step up is from provincial to international level, not for a second. But I think the way Connacht are playing is much more in line with how Ireland are playing now. And I think when Jack Harty came into the Ireland squad in 2019, that's not how Ireland were looking to play the game. So all of a sudden Jack Harty was being asked to do things that just didn't really suit his game. So I think the stars are aligning a little bit for him now. I think, you know, like I said, he's taken on board what Andy Farrell has said, and to be fair, that's exactly what you want from a coach's point of view. I think James Hume is another one who's gone away and taken the feedback. Constructive criticism is probably the way to put it, and he's got the best possible response. And that probably shows that there's a good vibe, I'd say, within the wider squad as well. Like you said, Jerry, you know, guys feel like if they're playing well for their provinces, and obviously game time has been so limited over the last while, but they feel like now if they're playing well, that they're going to be rewarded for it.
The selection of Carberry is really interesting, because what they could have done was include Carberry with an asterisk and say, when he is fit, we'll add him to the squad. But in the meantime, we're also bringing Harry Byrne. They didn't do that. They were like, no, when he's fit, he's back in. You haven't done enough you haven't gotten your own team just yet. And it's very difficult because there's been hardly any games. But it's definitely, right, everybody else needs to step up. He is our number 2, it looks like. And as soon as he's back, we're going to put him in the squad. Is there any indication of when that might be?
No, we haven't really heard much, but like, I highly doubt that he would be brought. Like, Ireland are going to Portugal next week for a training camp, as they would normally do before the Six Nations, and all indications are that Joey Carberry and Ian Henderson are going to be on the plane. I would imagine that he's going to be touch and go for the Wales game. I just don't see why Ireland wouldn't bring in, like you said, Harry Byrne into the squad if there was that much doubt over him. We're not privy, obviously, to that kind of information, but that would be my sense, that he's probably touch and go for Wales. But I would still fully expect Carty to be on the bench with with Joey Carbery potentially coming into the mix for France the following week.
It's clear they want to spend as much time as possible with Carbery in the squad, that they've obviously had the absence because of the injuries for such a long period of time as well, that they want to just make sure that he's in every meeting, that he's in every conversation, that he's in every walkthrough, even if he's not actually picking up the rugby ball and not feeling the weight of it in his hand, but that he is legitimately implicated in all of the decision making from now up until the World Cup, really.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? We all know Johnny Sexton's injury record and anything can happen, and yeah, it makes sense for Andy Farrell to want Carbery to be on top of the brief. I'm sure they're going to have tweaks to their attacking game plan, because again, if we think back to 2019, that's when Ireland came unstuck because they stood still and they didn't evolve their game plan. Teams had figured them out. So I think they definitely go into the Six Nations with a target on their back because of how well they did last year. Obviously, the win over the All Blacks. And I was kind of thinking back to the previous World Cup cycle, that dreaded word, but the year before was the 2018 when Ireland won the Grand Slam. And when you look at this squad, there's a lot of potential there. So you know what's going to happen, don't you? Ireland are going to win the Grand Slam and then everyone's going to think we're going to win the World Cup. But
well, we were just saying we should throw this one for whatever reason this year. It's like, no, sorry, we're unavailable to win this time.
Yeah, like it's interesting because you see England's approach and they're still very much, Eddie Jones is still very much tinkering with kind of the shape up and makeup of what their squad is going to be. He's left a lot of experienced players out, whereas I think, and I'm being facetious by the way in saying that Ireland are going to win the Grand Slam and win the World Cup, obviously.
No, we've just clipped it up, it's already out.
Yeah, but I think you can really see the core though of what the squad is going to be in France, and I think over a year out from that, I think that's such a positive thing, because even I think there's a really good balance of experienced players like Sexton, Peter O'Mahony, your Keith Earls, or Conor Murray, with the younger guys who are coming through. And the younger guys who are coming through, like a lot of them are like, they're not guys who are coming in here to make up the numbers, for want of a better term. Like you look at guys like Ronan Kelleher and Dan Sheahan, like they are like Ireland's number 1 and 2 in the battle to be first choice hooker over the next kind of 18 months is going to be incredible. Like guys like, Craig Casey forcing the issue. I think a guy like James Hume is really going to ask questions. And Robert Balakoon, I think, is a guy who I think he's ready to start. Like I think if you were picking an Ireland team in the morning to play Wales, like he would certainly be in my Ireland team. So
who are you dropping?
Well, I think James Lowe's injury. Okay. James Lowe's injury obviously opens. Yeah, exactly. That opens up a gap. It's not a like for like replacement, but you can easily put Keith Earls or an Andrew Conway onto the left wing and have Robert Balakoon on the right wing. But I think he's a guy now who's ready to be unleashed. He came back from injury last week. In Ulster's win in Northampton was superb. Again, Andy Farrell is a big fan. We saw his try last summer as well. He's got it all really. Like he's superb athletic frame, top end speed, devastating footwork, and he's actually a really, really good defender as well, which kind of goes unnoticed, I think, a lot of times when we see guys like this break on the scene. So I think there's a lot to be excited about the Six Nations, but also the way the direction of the squad overall is heading.
We're due to do our depth chart for the back three next week, and I'm very interested to see what happens when you get past Hugo Keenan. He's obviously our first choice fullback. He's playing brilliantly and has been absolutely sensational since he arrived, and responded really well to playing in front of a crowd as well. That's kind of, again, just bringing that up, is like that's how quick, it's a COVID career really that we've seen from Keenan from an Ireland perspective. But what happens if he gets injured? Who is our second choice fullback? Are we looking at Conway moving back there, or is this where we actually try and get some game time for Lowry at fullback and see what that looks like?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the positions that's really up for grabs. Like I was very surprised that Ireland didn't look at someone else, particularly in that Argentina game in November. I think at this stage, like it's Hugo Keenan's rise has been absolutely incredible. Like you think back to he's barely been on the scene, but since he's broken into the Ireland team, he's started every game and only been substituted twice, pretty much played 80 minutes every time. Like remarkable levels of consistency. But yeah, that is an issue. Like Ireland need to figure out who the backup is. I think when Simon Zebo came back, you would have thought that he was the obvious one. it just hasn't worked out between injury and COVID issues at Munster. Zebo has barely played this season. So yeah, they need to have a look at that. I thought it was interesting that Joey Carberry ended up getting some game time there against, I think it was Argentina as well. Last year they brought Harry Byrne on, and when you thought they were going to bring Carberry off, they actually put him back to full back. So I don't think that that's been ruled out as a potential option going forward. Now it's very tricky because Joey Carberry is not going to be playing full back for Munster. They signed him as a 10. He's their first choice 10. So Michael Lowry is certainly one who'd come into the equation. Another guy like Jack Harty, who's there on merit, been absolutely superb for Ulster this season. Has said himself that his preferred position is out half. It's where he played in school. But I mean, from an Ulster point of view, he's going so well at full back. Why would you move him? But on Andrew Conway, I've been saying this for years that I think, and like Munster in Ireland, Munster particularly probably have missed a trick by not putting him back there. But people far more qualified than me have thought it was better to leave him on the wing. But you look how good he is in the air, how good his footwork is and stuff. So I'm surprised they haven't done that, but I don't think at this stage it's going to be a realistic option either. So that's a very long-winded way, Ger, of answering your question and saying that there are loads of contenders, but I think they really need to start having a look at that, because you can't just assume. It goes back to the point I made about the out halves, in succession planning. You can't just assume Hugo Keenan is going to be there and fit all the time. They need to start having a look as well at other options.
This could be people's first opportunity to see Mac Hansen. Will be if he plays for Ireland. Obviously he's uncapped, but for him catapulting from the Connacht stage to the Ireland stage, if he gets a game, is he in the squad to see what it's like to be in a squad, or is he in the squad to get some game time, do you think?
No, I think he's definitely in the squad to get some game time, because if you remember, he got called into the squad last November as a development player, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't quite a development player, but I think even that was a shrewd move by Andy Farrell and the Ireland coaches to do that last year, because the Wallabies, you'll remember, were touring this part of the world. I think they were in Scotland at the time, and Australia were down a lot of numbers. Mac Hansen, obviously born in Australia, so they were potentially sniffing around him to try and get him back. So I think it was really clever to, put an arm around Mac Hansen and say, look, you're our guy. We're gonna cap you. I think Ireland did something similar with Mike Haley when he came over a couple of years ago, and he won a cap in a World Cup warm-up game. So I definitely don't think he's there to make up the numbers. He's obviously been out for the last few weeks, so I think that made his selection not surprising, but I think he's done well to get in there, considering he hasn't played any game time, and it's a big step up. I think he's been devastating with ball in hand. I mean, just like he's become a real crowd favourite at the sports ground, but I think he's got work to do on his defence, which probably seems to be a bit of a common theme with wingers breaking into the Ireland team. You think of Jacob Stockdale, James Lowe, Mac Hansen probably fits into the same kind of mould, in that super going forward, but has a few, I would say, things to iron out defensively.
It's obviously very hard to be a defender on the wing, because they get exposed quite a lot. Like, it's just difficult, because you tend to be one-on-one with very, very fast, creative players. Like
Sheahan.
It's tough.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Eoin, actually, yeah, there might be a bit of crack between Dan Sheahan now and Mac Hansen now that they're in the same squad, because, I mean, as a winger, I know Dan Sheahan is ridiculous, like footwork, pace, power, but as a winger, you don't want to get done by a hooker out wide like that.
Cian, do you reckon that, like, it felt that maybe like there were bigger problems than this, but at the end of the 2018 Six Nations, it felt that people could almost name the Ireland squad blindfolded. They'd be able to tell you exactly who Schmidt's 15 was. Granted, there are like 5 big games to play, and God forbid Ireland win a Grand Slam. That would be terrible, obviously. Ireland would probably have a fair idea of who their best 15 are, but it does feel that if we're jumping to conclusions a little bit on this squad, there are a number of positions here that are still very much up for grabs, or at least the backup positions, which is there's a healthier conversation around that, and there's a healthier level of mystery around some of those positions than there was maybe 4 years ago.
Yeah, for sure, Eoin. Like, it goes back to my point that, like, Ireland did become predictable. They came predictable in how they were playing, but they came predictable in their team selection as well. I think it was George Ford probably hit the nail on the head. I think it was in 2019 when he said, if Ireland shut down Johnny Sexton, or if opposition teams shut down Johnny Sexton, you shut down Ireland. And that's the way teams were looking at them now. The question is, like, are Ireland still in the same point? Are they still overly reliant on Johnny Sexton? I would still say that the gap between Johnny Sexton and Joey Carberry or Jack Harty is still significant, but I think crucially there are much more strings to Ireland's bow than there were in 2019. I think in 2018 was different, but I think when you have forwards and a front row like Andrew Porter, Ronan Kelleher and Tyg Furlong, and a back row of Jack Conan, Josh van der Fleer and Caelan Doris, that allows you to do so many different things. Every one of the pack, I think, that starts in the Six Nations is going to be totally comfortable on the ball. That might not have been the case at stages in 2019. I think Gary Ringrose is even looking far more comfortable on the ball too in the last kind of 18 months, and he's been pushed on by James Hume too. So there is that healthy competition within the squad, but I also think crucially the game plan has evolved, and that's why it's so important now that they still find like that it's still an evolution, that there isn't a kind of an acceptance, okay, that, you know, Ireland beat the All Blacks last year, and that's it now, they've figured it out. Like teams are gonna, like I said, Ireland are gonna have a target on their back. The amount of hours that they spend pouring over the footage, so it's about Ireland continuing to add subtle tweaks, and I've no doubt that they're going to do that, to be honest. I think there's a real inherent understanding that was one of the good things about Andy Farrell taking on the job. Like, he had a front row seat for what went wrong in 2019, and he's a smart guy. I think he'll have said, okay, we can't make the same mistakes twice. And I think all indications are like I was one of the ones as well who were really heavily critical of Mike Catt's game plan over the last couple of years, but we've seen it really come to fruition now, and the players look far more comfortable in what they're being asked to do as well. And like I said, when you look at the athletic profile of the pack, and even the guys that are coming in behind them like a Ryan Baird, there's every reason to be optimistic about the direction. Without getting ahead of ourselves, there's every reason to be optimistic.
We should talk about the news that's come out in the last 24 hours or so that Jason Jenkins might be moving from Munster to Leinster. This was obviously a stick that was used to beat Munster with when he signed, that he was an opportunity blocker for some of the younger players. Presumably the same applies in Leinster. Like, you know, it doesn't seem that different a situation where we're taking somebody from South Africa, essentially. The fact he's coming from Munster is neither here nor there. Like, do Leinster really not have young players who might be able to fill this role?
Yeah, like I'm not going to be hypocritical and sit here and say, oh yeah, you know, it's all grand for Leinster to sign him, when I was critical of Munster signing him for a few different reasons. Now, Munster fans will say that, oh, like he hasn't blocked anyone, but the reason he hasn't blocked anyone primarily is the guy has played 18 minutes since he's arrived. Like, he's been, in that regard, he's been a disastrous signing when you look at the return on investment that Munster have gotten. So yeah, Leinster do have players coming through their system. That's the surprising thing. Now, it's no secret that Leinster have been looking for a big, powerful lock for the last, I would say, 12 months, particularly since the defeat to La Rochelle. For all that they have, they do believe that they have a power deficit there. Now, you have a guy like Jack Dunn, who is, I think, 118 kg, 6'7" maybe, coming through their system, who was really good at Irish under-20s level. And like as a country, we don't produce guys of that pure mass. So the talk is that he's going to go to Exeter. Now, Leo Cullen is obviously a very good judge of a lock, having played there so long himself, but I'm a bit surprised that they haven't taken more of a look at him. Another guy, Charlie Ryan, is coming through their academy. He captained Ireland to the Ireland under-20s to a Grand Slam in 2019, but we've barely seen him at all either. So look, obviously Leinster are making judgments behind the scenes, but like, I'm surprised they're not going for, without being disrespectful, I would say Jason Jenkins, and like they were linked with Chris Vui as well, who's the Bristol lock, plays for Samoa. I would say they're the second tier of like elite second rows. I would have thought if Leinster are going out signing someone, it needs to be like on a Scott Fardy level, or, you know, that literally the tier above, like an Eben Estebet or some guys like that. Now, easier said than done to get these guys, particularly in so close to a World Cup, but obviously that's the market that they're shopping in. All indications are that Jenkins is a super player, but like Munster certainly haven't seen it at all. Like, the poor guy's been cursed with injury, so it's a risk from. It's a big risk to sign
somebody with an injury profile like this. Is a big risk, and that, I think, is the other side. Apart from, okay, so the success of Leinster's big signings in the pack, you all the way back to Rocky Elsom, Brad Thorne. You would say Scott Fardy was a success over the period of time, and it didn't really prevent the best young players coming through in that. You know, you would maybe argue that he helped the second row players coming through, James Ryan, and even the back row, when he would play in the back row, that it wasn't like he was blocking the emergence of any of those world-class back rowers that we've seen from Leinster over the period of time. So maybe the squad's makeup is slightly different. It's like, I don't really think Dialende stopped the backs in Munster from progressing. It was like, here's a world-class talent you're injecting into training every day, and you can see the benefit of that in the long run. But signing one of these players who's in that tier where it's like, is he that much better than Jack Dunn, for example? Is he really that much better that we're allowing a good young Irish talent to go to England and then saying, okay, we're going to take this injury-prone player and hopefully get some game time out of him?
It's a very un-Leinster thing to do as well, because they're normally, like, they've obviously had a couple of duds along the way, everyone has, but like, they're normally like so astute when they do bring overseas players in. And you mentioned the calibre of guys that they brought in, but all of those guys were established internationals. Like, I don't think anyone has an issue. Like, there was no one saying that RG Snyman or Damien Dialende or Ruaidhri like are blocking young talent, because they're elite players and like players can learn at them. Like, Jason Jenkins has been a bit of a journeyman, probably. Like, you know, he played a bit in Japan. He's come to Munster. He only signed a 1-year deal with Munster. So yeah, if it comes to pass, I think it'll be interesting. And you know what I was also thinking as well is, you remember Victor Matfield last week or the week before kind of gave us a bit of a, you know, told tales of a conversation he had with Johan van Graan behind the scenes, and one of the lines that stood out was, all the good players go to Leinster. And maybe, you know, I was kind of thinking maybe it was lost in translation a bit, but now I'm starting to think that maybe that's what he was referring to, that Munster were going to lose. Now, he was only on a 1-year deal, but that Leinster were going to snap up Jason Jenkins, because I think Van Graan was probably hopeful that he would go to Bath with him. So look, it is very, it's like, I think it's a strange signing. I don't understand it. I thought it was Munster, when Munster were signing Jason Jenkins, I thought it was a strange signing. The thing is, if you talk to anyone in South Africa, they'll tell you that this guy is a super, super talent. But I mean, you can only judge off what you've seen, and we haven't seen it. And
maybe they've got him at a discount because of the injury situation, and this time next year he's played all the big games in the Champions Cup and kept Ryan Baird out of the team, and we're like, what's going on here? Why is Ryan Baird not getting some game time?
And that would be a fair enough gripe if that happens. Like, we're talking about Ryan Baird as one of the next guys in this like super athletic, you know, Ireland pack. So it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting, especially not having had a proper look at someone like Jack Dunn.
Yeah, maybe Jack Dunn going to Exeter is going to be great for his career. If he can get in that Exeter team, like, that's a brilliant setup for him to be going to between the ages of 23 and 24, 25, 26, and then you get him back, hopefully, and he becomes a number one. So obviously bigger brains than ours, us mere mortals, are working away in the background of this. Cian, good stuff. Thanks a million. Delighted you nailed your colour to the mast. It's a grand slam for Ireland.
I hope that's not live.
8:42. That's Cian Tracey, the Irish Independent, giving us his thoughts this morning. You can give us your thoughts too. Philip Nolan says, fair play to Eoin for suffering through watching that game again. Great analysis in that sense. He did it. Yeah, great analysis in that sense. You showed up. Exactly. Well done.
After battle, the best ability is availability.
David Wall says, fair play. Carty got totally pushed under the bus. We don't trust a creative player who plays every game and is a captain, while we talk so much about 10s who aren't even second choice at URC level. We have a very weird relationship with 10 in Irish rugby, all the way back to like before my time. It just seems to be the thing that we get obsessed about for whatever reason.
Every country does, I'm sure.
Well, we like our messiahs, don't we?
Yeah. And the 10 is the messiah. He's got all the power.
Well, if you invest everything in a messiah, you don't have to do any work yourself. Do you know? And then you invest all of your hopes and dreams, and then they let you down. You have a scapegoat, as opposed to, well, what could I have done to fix the situation? You know, my tiny little bit of this. I'm not talking about like us influencing the Ireland situation, but like maybe, you know, talking about grassroots and squad development and widening the game, all the stuff that isn't like, well, who's the 10?
Yeah.
FJ on YouTube says, I can't put my finger on why I think Carty is a talented handicapper rather than a Group 1 horse. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully he gets the chance to prove me wrong. Hopefully he gets the chance to play in a big game with the first choice Ireland pack in front of him and the first choice Ireland centres behind him, and it's like he steps up, because there's a good possibility that we're going to see 2 or 3 years of the peak of his career coming now, where he's had that comeback. Like, I think we really underrate the resilience that is required from professional sports people to come back from setbacks. And when they've done that, they are a different animal. They're a completely different beast. And so that's what I'm really looking forward to. Jack Carty's got the nod. He's fought through everything. He's constantly living with the pressure of being one of the most spoken about players in Irish rugby, and now he's getting his chance. Fair play to him.
Yeah, like the knock-on impact of this is interesting as well, or the selections of 10, and listening to Cian there talk about what Ireland are thinking with Joey Carberry is fascinating. That, like, is he potentially to pack up at 15? Like, you would think that if we believe the IRFU level of control exists in this country, then Munster might have been strong-armed into playing Joey Carberry at 15 at some point.
Let's wait and see who gets the gig.
But then again, like, they've got Mike Haley absolutely flying at the moment, who's having a brilliant season and was brilliant last weekend for Munster. So they've looked around at their options and said, we don't need you at 15.
John Duggan's with us at 8:45 this morning. Very happy this morning, John, I suspect.
Cian, Owen, good morning. Yes, there's always the array of celebrations that you can have. Unfortunately, when you get to about 9 or 10 o'clock, when you're up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you're into the twilight zone of celebrations. So I didn't leave the bed. Now, normally I might be just actually opening the door of the front door and just running down the street after what I saw last night, because it was incredible.
You're like Al Pacino. It's just when I thought I was out, they sucked me back in, because there was definitely times under Mourinho where you were out, you were done, and then after Mourinho it was like, why do I have to support this team? Why do I have to watch this crap?
Well, I'm the most emotional Tottenham Hotspur supporter, because I had that TV through the window GIF to go, ready to go at 2-1 down last night, and then it was deleted obviously when Stephen Bergwijn equalised, and then you think, okay, that's amazing, and then 80 seconds later Harry Kane puts through the magic ball and it's in the net. So I really hope sometimes that the Spurs official account are not watching my tweets about Spurs, because it really does go from A to Z in terms of you're an absolute shambles, an absolute disgrace too, I love you so much. So there's no in between. It's completely black and white.
So you were watching the game in bed?
Yeah.
Well, is it a phone? Is it a laptop?
I've got the TV. I've got the whole. I'm a guy with I'm like Biff Tannen. I've got the whole, like, the TV screens and all that kind of thing, and it's quite a high tech setup. So look, you have to have your home comforts.
It's mad how these multi-billion-pound dollar enterprises are so chaotically run. When you think about Manchester United and the billions and billions and billions that are slushing around, and they haven't a clue what they're doing. And Spurs, like, the difference between, as you said, the difference between 2-1 and 3-2 is like, it could be season defining.
The Champions League, this could be worth millions. Thank you, Brendan Rodgers, and thank you, Yuri Tielemans, for the madness of what they did, just giving the ball away when they conceded the 2-2 draw. But I've always said about Spurs are one of the most best run businesses in world football, given the fact that they've turned a business that was worth about 20 million in 2000 into a business that's worth over $1 billion, possibly $2 billion if Joe Lewis and Daniel Levy were going to sell it. But the product they've never got right in the pitch.
Well, they had a grand welcome for themselves in the midst of that, and that type of narrative, that was certainly something that they would be proud of. But you couldn't have said they were a well-run business from the point where they appointed Mourinho. Like, especially because what they need is everybody coming to the stadium on fire, thinking this is the best atmosphere in the world. We've set up this entertainment company where you're going to come along and be entertained, and it was like, Nuno? What? He's our manager? Yeah. When we reopen the stadium project, what? This guy?
They were run like that for about the first 6 or 7 years, with all these managers like Ramos, and I know he won a trophy, and Santini, and Hoddle was there for a while, and until Harry Redknapp actually came into the club. He was the first manager, and then Martin Yall, and then Harry Redknapp, and then Pochettino. But they got lucky with Pochettino, because they punched massively above their weight with their wage bill, and one of the best managers they've ever could have had, and they didn't reward him in the transfer market, and look what happened. So they've been really scrambling since then. There is no excuses now. It is all on the board, it is all on the players, because Antonio Conte knows what he's doing. Antonio Conte, I love his interviews, because he's almost like the Tasmanian dust devil on the sideline, and then when he's in the interview room, he's like somebody who's in the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, so he's able to just calm down. He's able to bring it from 100 back to 0. So look, you'd want to play for him, and he's able to polish jewels. And
well, let's talk about that. Yeah. So half time, things not going great. He looks to his bench and he sees Matt Doherty and he goes, I like the cut of your jib.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Matt Doherty was abject against Chelsea in that first Carabao Cup semi-final first leg, but he played on the left. Last night he played on the right. It was almost like he was a rugby player at times. He was just disrupting the Leicester play, was involved in that equaliser for Bergwijn. And you just hope that he gets the chance now, because Harry Winks was in the cold, and Harry Winks has proved himself for Conte, and was in the team last night as part of a 3 in the middle. Dede's gone, and Ndombele is gone, the most record signing. maybe this might give a glimmer of a hope that Matt Doherty will get a chance, because he's not made a Premier League start this season for the whole season, either under Nuno or under Conte. So maybe he might get a week coming on for Emerson Royal at half time.
Or perhaps this is his last appearance and they sell him as part of that deal to Wolves, and it's the same with Bergwijn.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, Bergwijn, a bit like Ronnie Rosenthal. Ronnie Rosenthal, one of those games, like Bergwijn scored in his debut, remember, against Man City, but Ajax have gone in for a couple of bids for him, so we'll see what happens. But Conte will improve players.
Yeah, so fingers crossed for Matt Doherty. We could really do with him getting into that team.
Any Irish player needs to be playing.
And Conte saying, yeah, he's my guy, and giving him that confidence, and him having a couple of seasons at that level would be amazing.
I thought that Rangnick was great last night in his interview, and speaking about Cristiano Ronaldo. Let's hear from him now.
Cristiano was not happy. I mean, he's a goal scorer. He would have wished to stay on and maybe score a goal himself. But for us, it was more important to be compact, to make sure that we have enough legs and enough also strong headers to defend their free kicks, their set pieces. And when we had scored the third goal, I said exactly that to him. I said, look, Cristiano, I understand that you're still ambitious and you want to score yourself, but maybe in a couple of years when you're a head coach yourself, you will hopefully take the same decision and be in the same role that I was today after 75 minutes.
So Ronaldo's calling out the mentality of the younger players last week in an interview, and then he's acting like that last night. It's the worst side of Ronaldo. He's 37 next month, the preening side, the love of his own reflection in the mirror. And I just thought that you see Elanga playing so well last night, you see Greenwood, you see Rashford actually coming on and scoring. I thought Rangnick needed to do that. I think he needs to assert, and he has asserted by putting Elanga into the team. And I'll be interested to see what he's going to do with Harry Maguire now. When Maguire's back to full fitness, will Harry Maguire get back into the team? Because there was that sense under Solskjaer that some players were undroppable. I know Ronaldo scored 14 goals in 23 appearances, but nobody's bigger than the club.
Well, he might go three at the back like he did in the end last night. He might decide that actually we're going to try this and have this in our armoury as something that we're allowed to do, because previous managers would have said, oh, this is not the Manchester United way, we can't really do this, it's not going to work for us. But actually, you know what, try it, see what happens. Seems to be working for loads of other teams. Right, anything else, John?
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on. Arsenal against Liverpool at the Emirates tonight, the Carabao Cup semi-final, second leg. Thomas Partey might be back for that one. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain is out, 7:45 kickoff. Rory McIlroy, ordinary stuff. HSBC Championship in Abu Dhabi, 4 birdies, 4 bogeys, 72, level par, already 8 shots behind the leader, Scotland, Scott Jamieson. Shane Lowry and Padraig Harrington have just teed off. Seamus Power and Graham McDowell in the field for the American Express. If you want to get some advice on that, go to otbsports.com for the virtual insanity picks. Andy Murray's lost 2 sets now to Taro Daniel at the Australian Open men's singles, so he's looking like he could be on the verge of going out. Andy Murray, it's a tough ask with that metal hip. At the Rod Laver Arena, it's Nick Kyrgios against Daniil Medvedev. That's a really interesting battle. Medvedev 3-2 up at the moment in the first set, and Murad Kanu 3-1 up on Danka Kovanic in their encounter in the women's singles. Garbina Muguruza is out, beaten by Elise Cornet 6-3, 6-3, the third seed, knocked out of the Australian Open. And it's going to be Laois against the Dubs in Saturday's O'Byrne Cup final, lads. Laois beating Kildare on penalties last night. Every game at the moment in the GA football season seems to be going to spot kicks.
Fergal Byron's son, the Laois goalkeeper, last night, to make you feel old.
Yeah, 2003. God.
Jeez.
Remember being there. That was, 1946 to 2003, and they haven't been back since to win it. But hopefully Laois will be maybe winning on Saturday.
John, good stuff. Thanks a million. We'll hear more from John, of course, on Saturday afternoon on Off the Ball on Newstalk, and you can read his stuff, as he said, on the OTB Sports app. Will O'Callaghan is ready for the first time for the official Hurling Power Rankings.
Some of these pundits,
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
I'd like to play the hard man when they're on it. It's not very pleasant when you're trying to manage a team. All you're looking for is a bit of civility and a bit of decency, but they just miss you like you know, you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
Well, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. I worry when I hear the forward cell saying these are going to be controversial. So obviously you've already had a look at the graphics.
Are you really ready for what you're getting into? It's a lifetime of pain. We call them the power rankings, but they're pain rankings for you who creates them and for Eoin. Like, Eoin does not go out anymore, except in Japan where he's recognised as a YouTuber, but he doesn't go out anymore without being recognised as the idiot behind the power rankings, or the
people like, there was a little boy came up to me in the street earlier on this week, and he was like, hey, aren't you Eoin Sheahan? You're the boy who does the thought that they are absolutely spot on. You're my hero. And then I signed like an Antrim jersey or something like that.
Excellent.
Definitely something we can file under. That definitely happened.
Yeah. Will, I mean, I'm sorry for your trouble. I'm delighted you're doing this, but you're a madman. You are, for stepping into it in the first place, and then secondly for your power rankings. So let's get going, right?
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah. Let's get going. Let's start with the. Let's start with. We start at the bottom, Will.
Yeah, we'll go from the bottom up. So I've gone with 12 teams. So essentially, it's the Liam McCarthy team.
There's 12 counties in Ireland, are there?
Well, look, this would have been awkward if I started to go down and started mixing divisions, and then we're looking at 3 different tiered competitions. Again, it's where it's slightly different to football. So the 3 teams who are probably unlucky not to be in the top 12 and who are probably just outside it would be Kerry, I think, are just behind Westmeath, who are my number 12. And then I think you'd have Offaly and Carlow just behind them. Offaly will operate in Division 1 of the league this year, but they only won the third flight championship last season and will probably be considered the third favourites to win the Joe McDonagh Cup this year. And Carlow, just as a consistent Joe McDonagh Cup team, and a team who very recently were operating in Division 1 and the Liam McCarthy, just outside the top 12. But I think Kerry are the next best currently, and that's not just based on their win against Tipperary in the Munster Hurling League. I think Kerry have been showing kind of consistent performance level just outside the Liam McCarthy and lost the Joe McDonagh Cup last year. Westmeath coming up into the Liam McCarthy Championship again for next season, having very impressively won the Joe McDonagh Cup, go in at number 12. Antrim, who they replace in the Top Flight Championship, who go down to the Joe McDonagh, are in 11th. They'll be expected to bounce back this year from the McDonagh Championship. And I think you have to have Laois just above them in number 10, because Laois beat Antrim in the most meaningful fixture for both counties last year to stay in the Liam McCarthy Championship. This is the 11th year in a row that Laois are going to operate in Division 1 of the Hurling League. So while I think there's a gap between these bottom 3 teams and the sides we're going to talk about just above them, I think that's a pretty fair ranking of the 3 teams who just make the top 12.
Yeah, and I think people who are watching this on YouTube will see that there's big controversy coming there at number 9. But let's just go back a little bit. Like, first of all, there was Michael Dignan having a pop off Kerry Hurling for, going for players that happen to be essentially from Kerry because their parents are from Kerry. That was a weird thing to go after Kerry for. And then second of all, you've got Will O'Callaghan just deciding that they don't merit near inclusion in the hurling rankings. This is the beef that's developing between Kerry and Offaly. It seems, Will, that's you sparked 1982 all over again.
Despite the kind words I just gave about Stephen Malumphey's side beating Tipperary in the Munster Hurling Cup a few weeks ago, yeah, look, until Kerry get up into the Liam McCarthy Championship, and I'm one of the firm believers in hurling circles that if they were to get promoted from the Joe McDonagh, they should go into the Munster Championship. I don't like the fact that Antrim and Kerry go into Leinster as an effective divisional development championship each summer, but that's the way that the structures are, and I think Kerry have got a very good chance of winning the Joe McDonagh this year. I think Antrim are probably just a notch above them, which is why Antrim are inside the top 12. But I think Kerry definitely are the team who I'd have in 13th at the moment. And yeah, maybe that moves us on nicely to number 9.
Hang on. And cold comfort to the people of Kerry who no longer exist, that hurling fraternity who no longer exists, isn't it John Myler who's in charge of the intermediate team?
Kilmiley.
Yeah. So they don't exist. You're telling David Myler that all the work that his dad puts in, gone in it's a bottle of smoke.
With O'Callaghan's troops, Arsenal or Kerry are extinct.
All these guys who are involved in pushing hurling in the kingdom can put my words on the dressing room and say, look, let's get ourselves inside the top 12.
I realise it's obviously, because these are chiselled in granite, it's very difficult to just have written 13 Kerry, 14 whoever, 15. It would have been hours and hours and hours of work not to inflame the war. But with Kerry who they take this stuff well, Will. Notoriously they've laid down in the face of insults in the past. So I wish you well. I wish your mentions well. I wish your future trips to the kingdom well. Make sure you holiday in Donegal next summer. Let's move on to number 9, because this is it. This is it. Who's your number 9 team?
Number 9 are Galway, and this is exactly what Henry Shefflin has taken over from. He has come into a team who are the great underperformers from last summer. They were very comfortably beaten by Dublin in the championship. They exited pretty meekly in the qualifiers when they played against Waterford as well. It was a miserable summer on the back of a year where so much was expected of Galway. And people were talking them up as potential contenders against Limerick as well because of the way that they match up against the All-Ireland champions physically. But Galway did not get back to the level that they were in previous years. And as a result, I think they're the team who've made the slide down to the lowest of the contenders for the All-Ireland Championship. Now, that comes with the caveat that if they have a good year, they can definitely storm back up this leaderboard and potentially get back into the top 4. An expectation in Galway would be that they'll be competing back as an All-Ireland semi-final team. But a bit like Eoin with the football rankings last week, I think you have to base this on championship form from last year. And if you do so, Galway are below the teams that we're going to look at in the next slide. So as a result, Galway have to start the year in 9th place, and with plenty of question marks about them. I mean, no Joe Canning for this season. We'll see how the rebuild goes. And last week, and I'm not taking pre-season form a huge amount into account, but an experimental Galway team were beaten quite comprehensively by Dublin last Sunday, which would indicate that Galway still have a little bit to do to close that gap again.
Yeah, a lot of their best players aren't available for them at the moment for various reasons. The one thing I would say is that like last year's championship was obviously a weird, anachronistic, COVID shortened, and therefore I don't know if we can read as much into it as we should do. Like the core of this Galway team are All-Ireland winners. They legitimately have been up the steps. But is that core group, Ger, coming to a close now at this stage? And are they ushering in new players? Is there another kick in some of those players who were around in 2017? These are the question marks about Galway going into this year. Like, I genuinely think that they've got potential to be a top 4 team when we're talking about the hurling rankings at the end of this year. But right now, I think you have to view them as below the teams who are in the middle tier that we're going to talk about in a moment.
So, is it too much of a jump then to suggest that Galway can become the team best poised to take the crown off Limerick, or do you think that it's almost a year, 2 years to get themselves into the top of the middle pack again before we can even say that? Because that has been said. That has been one of the things that's been said about this Galway team.
That's the question mark, Eoin, isn't it? I mean, the benefit that they're going to get, Galway, is that when we go back to the Leinster Championship, which will be in a round-robin series, it's less likely that they'll have a one-off poor performance, say.
Oh, the Kerry lads are already on Will's. They've cut the line. Will, get out quick.
They really have. I've never seen that icon before.
Wow, is Will is he all right?
That is definitely the icon of severe peril.
Yeah,
that is peril for. I mean, I guess it's hard to just nail these, like, and I wouldn't know anything about not nailing the rankings, obviously, but Will has obviously fell victim to not nailing it.
Number 9, the 9th best team in the country being Galway. It'd be interesting to get Scales' take on this. He might be like, yeah, it's true. It's tough love. Yeah. Or it's like, what?
In fairness, Will does make a valid point that Henry Shefflin has been brought in for a reason. There's a reason why they had to change things up in the aftermath of last season, and they are at a pretty low ebb. They have just lost one of their best ever players. Like there are reasons why Galway are in a lowly place, but it just feels that there's so much hype around them that surely the hype can't be wrong. Hype is always right, isn't it? Like the hype that Galway, they're the number 2 hyped county in the country right now. Surely that can't be mistaken, can it?
Well, I think that we're underrating the potential. I think that you've got to add in. So what Will has done is he's looked at last year's results and gone, there's my matrix, away we go. Things have changed. Mm-hmm. There's been a significant change in Galway since then. Right? This giant hurling brain, this inspirational totemic figure has arrived. I mean, I know I've been giving out about messiahs all morning and for months and months and months, but like, this might be a literal hurling messiah. Like, this might actually be the hurling messiah who has arrived. And as atheistic as I am about most things, when he brandishes the hurl in the dressing room before they go out up to the skies, and when the lightning strikes, I won't be surprised. I won't be surprised if it's a summer of lightning.
Whenever you say like a giant hurling brain, all I can think of is it Krang, the guy from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, just a guy with brain in his belly going around holding a hurley. That's what I imagine Henry Shefflin to be when you describe him as a massive hurling brain.
Well, it might be, you know.
It's going to be fascinating. Like the thing is, you just sort of wish that Limerick weren't as good as they are, because this could genuinely be set up to be one of these crazy kind of like 1990s hurling seasons where anything can happen.
Yeah, but it might be, because there's a possibility that Limerick don't reach the same robotic levels of genius that they've had. Like, we all, because of the recovery, have forgotten about what happened in the tip game last year in that first half. Like, if the sending off happens, do they recover? I'm not sure. It would have been different. Like, anyway, Will is back. The backup generator kicked in.
Someone in Galway possibly pulled the Skype line at me when I was in the middle of making an argument as to why they should be in ninth place. But sorry about that.
I don't know if you missed my Messiah thing, but basically the Hurling Messiah has arrived in Galway, and so you have not factored in that things have changed from last season. Things have changed. Last season's results, I guarantee and I agree, should hold some weight. But in the meantime, new information came to light.
Yeah, look, here's the thing. We haven't seen enough of Galway under Henry Shefflin so far. I watched their game against Offaly in the Walsh Cup a couple of weekends ago, and they played a very nice style of hurling. It would appear, based on the way they played, and obviously Henry Shefflin has only had limited time with them so far, that they are going to hurl in a style that's not too dissimilar to how he played with Ballyhale Shamrocks. And given that Galway have got plenty of big physical players, both in their half-back line and in their forwards, they're going to be well able to win their own ball. And to that reason, I think just as I got cut off on Skype a few moments ago, I think they are a team you consider could put it up to Limerick in the All-Ireland Championship as a result. I mean, Tipperary fans, no doubt, and we'll talk about them in a moment and the changes that they've made, will feel that in the first half of the final in Munster last year, that maybe they showed that they're the closest to Limerick's level, but let them off the hook in the second half. Or you could argue the way that Limerick were just able to step up a level. But Galway showed in an All-Ireland semi-final 2 years ago that they were able to go toe-to-toe with Limerick. And if it wasn't for the injuries they picked up in that semi, it could have been a different result. And that's why I reckon Galway won't be finishing the year in ninth place. I'd be shocked if they're that low by the end of it.
Okay, maybe today I accept that that's where they are, but I think that they're actually 3, to be honest. Let's go. Let's look at the first page, because I think here there's going to be some issues too.
Okay, go on. Where are we taking issue with the way that we move into the
I'll go from 8 to 1. 8 is Wexford, 7 is Dublin, 6 is Clare, 5 is Tip, 4 is Kilkenny, 3 is Cork, 2 is Waterford, and 1 is Limerick. So Wexford at 8.
Do you want to start with why Dublin are just ahead of Wexford then? Is probably the easiest way to do this, I think. So Dublin got to the Leinster final last year, put in that performance against Galway to qualify for the final. I think they were a bit disappointing against Kilkenny in the decider itself, while Wexford ran Kilkenny incredibly close and won the best games in the championship last year, the one that went to extra time. But I think Dublin, given what they did last summer, have to be considered just above Wexford as a result. Wexford, I think, are interesting because just looking at their team sheets, even in the first couple of games in the post-Davy Fitzgerald era, some of those young players who were coming through that maybe didn't get a massive chance last year, where they were trying to go with the core group that won a Leinster championship to try and repeat the trick again, that maybe there might be a little bit of change there. Obviously, there's been a huge change in management and with the backroom team as well. So I think Wexford will probably end up going ahead of Dublin in these rankings, but at the moment I think you have to consider Dublin to be slightly ahead. The only problem is that Dublin, after the Galway game last year, and they had a fairly comprehensive victory against Antrim in the first round in Leinster as well, didn't really back it up in the Leinster final or when they were knocked out in the All-Ireland quarterfinal. So the trick from Matty Kenny's side is to build on that display against Galway last year and show they can do so consistently this season. But they're still going to be operating top flight of the league and will have aspirations of getting back to a Leinster final again. One wonders, is there a bit of a chewy middle in the Leinster Championship as well? You know, given that Wexford were able to win it a couple of years ago, given that Dublin were able to get to the final in the year just gone by, when we go back to the standard format, will it be a case of Galway and Kilkenny rising to the top within the province again? That remains to be seen. But right now, I think you'd have to see Dublin as best of the rest in Leinster right now, which is why they're just ahead of Wexford, if that makes sense.
Look, again, I think you're overrating last season versus what we've known historically, and I would say I'm very interested to see what Darragh Egan is going to do in Wexford.
Well, in fairness, I would absolutely back the decision to use last year rather than some sort of historical tendency as to what actually happens in Limerick. What I want to, or in hurling in general, what I want to know is how much stock are you putting in to the 19-point win for Dublin last weekend against Galway? Is that actually informing your decision making?
Yeah, see, I'm not sure. I mean, we obviously spoke about this from a Galway perspective a moment ago, where they'll say that they had a very experimental team out. I mean, Dublin will have to be very happy to have opened their year in that fashion, and they'll be looking to back that up when they play against Offaly this Sunday as well.
It doesn't matter.
If they do so,
it doesn't matter. These don't matter. No.
The only thing is, lads, there's a very short run into the hurling league this year because of the way that the year has gone. So teams, with the exception of maybe Kilkenny, who went extremely experimental last week, have been trying out systems and have been trying out players to be ready for a league getting underway. And for Dublin, the key thing is for them to stay in Division 1 after that. So I think for some counties, the end of these pre-season competitions take on a little bit more importance than others.
Okay, we need to horse through these now. Let's. Can I get the graphic back up for a second? Clare in 6. Okay, Tip in 5. I mean, I don't think
Tipper on the slide, and obviously look, for this year,
that's the
Colin
headline.
Bonner has now come in.
Tipper on the slide.
There's no Brendan Maher going into this season. There's talk about Pádraig Maher potentially playing in the forwards when he's been one of the best half-backs of his generation, which I think is an interesting experiment, but you're taken away from your half-back line. Like, look, Liam Sheedy last year went with a group of players in 2019 who won an All-Ireland Championship. He stayed faithful to them. All year, friends of mine in Tipperary were saying, why are they not using the players who've come through the underage system and have been so successful and shown so much potential, but maybe didn't get the game time that it was felt was deserved last year? So if Colin Bonner comes in and mixes things up, I mean, already Bubbles is not going to be part of the panel. Like, as West Ham fans will tell you, no Bubbles, no party. Like, I cannot believe that there's better forwards in Tipperary. That means that Bubbles
but
can't
maybe he's not fit enough.
For the season.
Maybe he's not fit enough. You know,
he's had an injury, but I still can't believe he wouldn't make the league squad.
New management comes in and decides to turn things over, doing exactly what the Tip fans in your life have been telling you, and you're like, no, we can't be doing this. I would still have, for what it's worth, it's, for me, it's Limerick, and then it's like a B spot where there's a tree group, and I don't have Cork in that. I have Galway, Tip, and just about Kilkenny clinging to there. That's for me. And then after that, I think, how are Waterford here? Like, what? Prove to me, Waterford, that you're not just going to at some point collapse.
Well, look, I think here's the thing for Waterford, and the best pre-Christmas present they could ever have got was that Liam Cahill decided not to go back to Tipperary and stay with Waterford for next season. He got them to an All-Ireland final 2 years ago. They went to an All-Ireland semi-final last year, albeit Limerick destroyed everyone once they got over that first half performance in the Munster Championship. So as a result, I don't think you can put Cork ahead of Waterford, despite the fact that Cork got to an All-Ireland final, because of the fact that Waterford have backed it up with 2 good championship years now in a row. And I think Waterford have to have aspirations of getting to at least an All-Ireland semi-final this year, which is why I think they're rightly in second place. I think you have to put Cork, out of respect for what they achieved last year, albeit they're on the longest run without lifting the Liam McCarthy now at this stage. And questions persist about Cork when you see what happened in the All-Ireland final last season. Like, they're so incredibly entertaining to watch. They've got so much firepower in the forward line. In Patrick Horgan, they've got maybe one of the best players never to win an All-Ireland Championship, and it'll be a horrible shame if he was to end without having a Celtic cross at the end of his career. But I'm just not sure if you would back Cork to overcome Limerick or even to overcome Waterford on the current standings. But you have to respect the fact that they got to an All-Ireland final last season. Kilkenny, this is the longest run. You talk about Cork's barren run. It's the longest run that Kilkenny have ever had under Cody without winning an All-Ireland title. It's gone to 7 seasons now at this stage, and it goes back to, you know, Kilkenny's drought at the end of the 90s and over when he took over. 24th season that he's now facing into now. He's without a few of his key generals, and like already announced that Colin Fennelly's not going to be playing inter-county hurling this year. Joey Holden's not going to be playing inter-county hurling. But for anyone who watches Ballyhale playing against St Thomas this weekend, they've got 2 of the last young hurlers of the year coming through. So even as those players start to exit stage left, there's still remarkable talent coming through in Kilkenny. And you can't argue about the fact that Cody's Kilkenny have been able to win a lot of tight games over the last years. I think back about the Galway-Leinster final in 2020. I think about that Wexford game last year. Kilkenny have got an ability to beat the teams around them, including beating Limerick in 2019. So for that reason, I think you have to have Kilkenny within the top 4.
Okay, so it's Kilkenny 4, Cork 3, Waterford 2, Limerick 1. And there's no point in talking about Limerick at this stage because they're so far ahead. We will obviously get into more detail about how they might be taken down the way we used to do with Dublin. What do you do about a problem with Limerick? Like Limerick, because obviously everybody's obsessed with it. No thoughts about maybe moving Clare up or down? They're kind of 6th at the moment. That's about right.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I think they could go anywhere between 6 and 4, depending on how the year pans out. Again, I thought Clare actually had a pretty good summer under Brian Lowell last season. Good to see that he's staying around. Clare have had plenty of off-field problems and disputes over the last while, but it seems that their group of players are very tightly knit together. They've really got behind that management team. They'll get a bit of a run out this week against the All-Ireland champions Limerick at the weekend in Ennis in the Munster Hurling Cup final, and then it's focused very much on the league for Clare after that. Again, keeping Tony Kelly fit is going to be so key. Like when they lost out to Waterford last year, it was so largely down to the fact that Tony Kelly was injured. Like he is their Superman within the panel, and
Duggan's back.
He's got the ability to win big games for them.
Yeah, look, anyway, Will, RIP your mentions is all I can say.
I'm already worried about Galway and Tipperary friends having to go at me already. This is the problem when you live close to the border to these two counties.
Tip are on the slide is the headline. Niall on YouTube says, are you really putting Galway number 9? Is this trying to be controversial? Nobody could actually think they're outside the top 5. Well, Will has given you his reasons, Niall. Deja Dude says Galway are always overhyped, but 9th is bananas. And Cassius King says, based on last year's championship, they deserve to be number 9, which is exactly Will's argument here.
Thanks a lot, Cassius.
Patrick Hickey says, did Galway not get battered by Dublin? Galway have loads of underage and failure has been tagged to Galway for years. Won All Ireland since 88 shows. Deja Dude says, maybe Limerick are first and Galway, Waterford, Tip, Kilkenny and Cork are joint second. Thin partitions. I think that's probably about right, and you could actually tack on Clare on most days, having some sense that they might be able to beat those teams. And for the rest, let's wait and see. You can't have Tip over Waterford. Tip are on the slide big time, says Shane, echoing your words. That might be your burner account. And the Unk says, Limerick will stroll to get another All-Ireland. Everyone else should be fighting for number 2 status. Waterford will crumble on the big stage as per. Hurling folk hate each other. It's great. And they're never...
It's not the concern about Limerick here as well, though. That it's like Limerick are going to have to be pushed to bring themselves to that level again, because they've had 4 years of just so much success now at this stage. And like, it sounds like a cliche that Limerick might beat themselves by not being able to stay at that level for a long period of time.
I think we'll certainly be looking for signs of that in the league.
Those comments there suggest to me that this country would be a very, very dangerous place if more than 12 counties played hurling.
Well, it's lucky they don't. Peter M says, Ger needs to let go of Larry Tompkins like it was the 80s. He hates Cork, no matter what sport it is. I know, this particular iteration of the Cork hurlers are very acceptable. Well, that is this week's Power Rankings.
Nice, lads.
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
I do love the Cork hurlers, by the way, all of them, all the way back. Right, here's what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. OTB Gold, Mick O'Connell at 80. It's from a few years back, but it is well worth your time to listen to that if you haven't heard it. Leaders' Questions at 3. Our retro panel is called Caring for the Sports Person. OTB Gold at 6 is Wexford, the 56 team, Ned Wheeler and Art Foley. So it's an old timers GAA special, and then the show is live tonight with Joe and the rest from 7 o'clock. If you want to get involved in the conversation this morning, a reminder to text the show 0879 180 180, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Republic of Ireland centre back Louise Quinn is next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
I'm even happier seeing Karen's face on screen, so it's just beautiful.
Keep up to date with the latest WSL action and the biggest interviews.
I just love moving teams, and then you have to do an initiation. Just love that moment in the sort of limelight.
Subscribe to the Koi Gig podcast stream on the OTB Sports app now.
How do you qualify as the most impressive statsman in the country? Just out of interest. What would you need? Like?
Oh, geez, it's a good question.
Is it analysing and crunching the numbers and how you feed it back to the management team? I just think I'll let you answer in a second. But the Limerick comparison with Ballygunner, I hadn't thought of it, but I started getting flashbacks there of them tackling and packs against Ballyea, and Ballyea hadn't experienced anything like that before when they met them in the first round of Munster. So it's a good comparison. I like the comparison, but how can you beat the best statsman in the country?
I think a lot of it is probably thinking outside the box. What do a lot of us think of with stats? We think of puck out retention, which is obviously true, scoring percentage, which is obviously true too. There are some of the obvious things you would look at, but by all accounts, a big part of what Limerick look at, a big part of what Ballygunner look at is, how many contacts are you making within a game? What's your tackle count like? And I'm not just necessarily talking about hooks and blocks, which can actually, if you look at a game, the losing team a lot of time can have more hooks and blocks than the winning team. I'm talking about how many, if someone is in possession, is he been made contact with twice while he's in possession? Are you turning him? Are you making sure that he is not able to go the route that he goes? So I think that would be one of the big things that some of the top stats lads would look at. Just a quick one on Seanie O'Donnell. So he's been involved with Ballygunner during the guts of the 8 in a row in Waterford. He was involved with Frank Flannery when Howlert won Leinster. I think he works with Frank Flannery no matter where he is, and he's won a lot around Cork as well. He's been with Ballygunner. He's been with Limerick. He's been with... he was actually not poached, but he was with Cork, and John Kiley got him with Limerick, and it has helped. Again, it's just another part of having the best on your side. And I don't exactly know what qualifies as being the best stats man, but if you're looking at the CV, I'd say that would tell you a lot.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You'll have heard Michael Verney there chatting with Will and Tommy on the latest episode of the Club Championship show. In the ad break there, explaining why Sean O'Donnell of Ballygunner in Limerick is regarded as the best statsman in the game. Our Club Championship coverage on Off the Ball is brought to you by AIB, proud sponsors of the football, hurling and camogie All-Ireland Club Championships. Check out the hashtag #TheToughest for more. It is 20 minutes past 9 this morning, and in a moment we're going to speak with Louise Quinn. The 2022 Spar FAI Primary School Fives programme was launched by Republic of Ireland women's footballer Louise Quinn. The line has just dropped with Louise there, but we'll get to her in a moment. Big reaction to Will's power rankings, big reaction to our conversation about Jack Carty earlier on. There's a lot of love for Jack Carty.
Yeah, like you can see why. The way in which he plays the game brings a good deal of creativity to things. Seems like very genuine man as well. So I think he's the sort of player you'd sort of root for. I think everybody from Connacht I think everybody kind of tries to get behind him, right?
Yeah, but I think the rest of the country are going to do that too if he gets his opportunity in the Six Nations as well. So yeah, as I said, the 2022 Spar FAI Primary School Fives programme was launched by Louise Quinn yesterday. It was all at the FAI's headquarters in Sports Campus Ireland to provide a coaching masterclass to a number of students who will be participating in the National Five-a-Side programme. The Spar FAI Primary School Fives programme is open to boys and girls from 4th, 5th and 6th class and puts emphasis on fun and inclusivity. Register for the Spar Fives by March the 4th at fai.ie/Spar Primary School Fives. And I'm delighted to say Louise Quinn is with us this morning. Louise, how are you getting on?
Morning, lads. How are you?
How are you at coaching kids? Because it can be a bit like herding cats sometimes.
Yeah, that is pretty much it. As long as you just kind of keep the ball rolling, keep them entertained. You know, if you kind of lose their attention for 1 second, it's going to be tough to get them back. But no, they were. You know, it was all good, and it was a great launch yesterday for a great idea to go forward in the schools.
Are you interested in coaching as a career after you finish playing? Is that something you've already thought about?
It's something where I am doing my UEFA B currently, so you know it's something there. I'm not going to say that coaching is top of my list, but I think it's up there. And then obviously what the UEFA B can bring to me just kind of across the board in sports, I think is really important. You know, I think I'm okay at it when I'm on the pitch, but then if you're to rotate me and put me there standing on the side where the manager does, I just don't know how I'll see the game, to be honest. It'll be a completely different job there. But you know, obviously I'm just enjoying playing at the moment.
What's the biggest thing you've learned in the B licence course so far?
Say that again, sorry?
What's the biggest thing on the UEFA B licence course that you've learned so far?
I think just trying to essentially put sessions together, but when they're, I think, when let's say numbers get cut or something happens, so they actually kind of make you put together training sessions when you go from 18 players down to almost 4 players. And so it's then adapting the session. And I think sometimes that's, you know, when I've coached before, puts the fear of God in me. I'm like, I want an even number. I just want to do this. You know, no one can get injured. No one can leave training early. This is what I need. You know, so it's just about obviously just all that, the adaptation and kind of, and maybe when it comes to it, I would say I'd probably struggle to pick a team, to be honest. I'd probably be a bit too nice, I think.
That's kind of an important part of being a manager, all right. Can I ask you this? Do you feel like the coaching stuff has actually made you more appreciative of the manager's job and the difficulties involved? And in essence, is it actually making you a better player and a better teammate?
Yeah, it's definitely, you can see the game differently. For sure, and obviously you can see maybe why a coach is then actually doing a certain drill, and then how it kind of translates onto the pitch. And literally, as you say, it's, you know, it can be an absolute struggle. And obviously during, you know, at the moment over the winters, during you know, with injuries, COVID, it's some of those things that you have to adapt to so much. And then obviously you see it as a player that maybe if you're not playing the game, massive disappointment. And then obviously as a manager, how do you kind of handle that and kind of take control of it? So for me, it's definitely something where I'm starting to see it a little bit from both sides.
And does that then have a knock on when you're getting tactical instructions? You're actually asking, I'm not saying better questions than you would have been, because obviously you would have been asking good questions in the first place, but like just my role in this now is part of a more continuous whole, as opposed to I just have to actually just look after my gig and I'm going to be grand.
Yeah, I think so. But I think generally as a player, I kind of do that anyway, kind of naturally. I do sometimes just kind of ask. Sometimes I actually, and I'm not going to say I ask stupid questions, but maybe a question I already kind of know the answer to. But, I feel like a couple of the girls maybe need to hear it, or it was a question that they asked earlier. So it's kind of, it definitely goes, back and forth. And I think it just leaves for good conversation then with the coach as well. If you can put across and make your point, very well, I think it just makes a bit of that communication easier. But obviously you don't want to take it, never take it too far that it seems like you're coaching the team or anything like that. Absolutely not. And I'd rather, be where I am right now.
Not yet. It seems like you're kind of slowly talking yourself into this. I'm not sure about that, and then slowly it's like, actually, you know what, I can do this.
No, you are talking me into it. I have to think about this so much.
All right, well, let's move on to the Republic of Ireland situation then. At the moment, you're in the papers today. You're obviously asked about the scenario for the World Cup, and qualification for the World Cup is about as difficult as it would be for the European Championships. It's a bit harder because obviously there's fewer European teams there, but it's not like it's a massive leap for us to be thinking and dreaming about this. It's not like we have to go, oh, well, if this campaign goes well, we'll be in good position for the European Championships. You're actually living right here in the right now, thinking there's a big opportunity for us here. Let's go for this.
Yeah, absolutely. It is an opportunity that we don't want to give up this time, and it definitely is a bit more difficult in terms of qualification towards the end, but as in is kind of getting the playoff spot realistic, absolutely. And and I think as well we've shown that you're able to compete against every team in this group, obviously be it Sweden, but then you can get some surprises from who are technically a lower rank Slovakia. Again, even though, I thought they were very, very good. So it's one of those where we, the old cliche, take each game as it comes. But, I think from the last campaign, you maybe ran a bit too far ahead of ourselves. Probably just the pause in play, down to restrictions didn't help anything either. So your mind starts wandering. When we were on a good flow. So obviously we're just going to try keep this going. And I think it's, we're performing well and we're enjoying our international football. So
is that an unconscious thing, Louise, that sort of getting ahead of yourself a little bit, like you mentioned there in the last campaign? Like, did you know that maybe before that Ukraine game that maybe that had already started to happen, or is it only now when you look back on it that you recognise that?
Yeah, probably when you look back at it, it is quite kind of, it's not something that you want to do, but then, and even in the moment when it does happen, you just try not think about it too much, because again, we overthought that game more than likely, and then felt kind of the pressure that came along with this. So, for us then it is, we will play Sweden. We can, there's definitely a chance for us to kind of pick up points, be it 1, maybe 3, kind of from what we showed in Tala. But again, only if we play, we have to play very, very well. There's no doubt about it. And then we've just got to kind of see how we go from there. And even that was it before we were ready to start the campaign. Then the game got cancelled, games have got moved. So, things have changed. So we've really just tried to kind of take it in our stride.
There's clearly been something happened in terms of just the quality of understanding of what you were trying to do, the interplay between yourselves. Was the friendly result against Australia the turning point that it seems to be from outside, or do you feel like the turning point had come before that and this was finally results catching up with performances? Or what do you put down the quantum leap forward, it seems? And maybe it doesn't feel like a massive leap forward for you guys, but certainly the results have been better, notwithstanding the Slovakia game.
Yeah, I think it was definitely something that was building, but you know, some of the games that we had were very difficult. You know, even mentally, it was a little bit of both. It was like, okay, yeah, we are playing better opponents. Okay, no, we didn't win, but yeah, did we stick to our game plan and do kind of what we wanted to do? And that was happening in some of the games, not all of the games. Kind of the, you know, before the Australia game. Yeah, so it was definitely a process there. Then I think we actually did hit a bit of a slump then when we kind of went to Iceland. You know, and that was they were some very difficult games, and you know, just kind of that was a tough one. And I think just from there it was kind of like, right, we could literally see exactly what we did wrong. And then in the next camp, I think we were all just we were just buzzing to see each other, and then kind of fix, you know, right those wrongs. And then it really just came together in the Australia game, and just how the camp went. And we know then, you know, when we can prepare that well, that we can then, you know, put in a top performance. You know, but so for me, obviously, it was, you know, where the noticeable difference is obviously Australia, and we've taken so much from that. You know, even in terms of getting crowds back into the stadium, and how we played and how we were able to kind of score goals, essentially. So I think that was something that we've struggled with, because we've always played opposition that essentially would have more of the ball, you know, and where you're maybe not expected to score too many goals. And so that was then the turning point.
Yeah, and so is your expectation now that you will be able to keep possession and be creative, as opposed to trying to live off scraps, that we are going to be the ones who, at least from a philosophical point of view, there's definitely going to be times when you might come up against a Germany or a United States or England or whoever who will have more of the ball, but other than that, we're definitely going to be trying to be the team who keeps the ball.
Yeah, I think it's still going to be a thing where we may have less of the ball, but it's how clinical we are with it. And I think that's kind of the most important thing, just kind of what we do with this. And I think then in the Slovakia game, we didn't show that. And that was, you know, and it was our quality on the ball that really kind of, you know, gave that away. Then obviously we showed it against Georgia, very different opponent. But for us, it was still a huge confidence booster to be able to, take control of the game. Whereas then obviously, because some, you know, who could be a team that are, you know, technically bottom of the group, can actually, they take control of the game almost, and actually, or put it to you and try to dictate what you need to do. So for us, it's going to be, you know, we've got friendly games coming up now in February. So for us, it'll be, I think, you know, we'll be working a lot more on that, and it shows across the club teams that we're well capable of, you know, as individuals, as keeping possession and you know, and having control of the ball.
On the club front then, Louise, it's been a pretty interesting start to the calendar year, I think. I mean, the win against Arsenal was obviously, I'd say, a massive moment in the journey of your season, and then obviously a bit of a setback, to say the least, against Manchester United. So where are the confidence levels at the moment after, I guess, two varying results to kickstart January?
I think it's, you know, I think it kind of gives us a little bit more of a restart now after we kind of, after that result, the United result, because we watched it back and we kind of, we need a bit of a different mentality when there's maybe a slight bit of pressure to a game, to be honest. You know, going into the Arsenal game, it kind of felt like I was a kind of no pressure game. Not expected to win, and listen, we caught Arsenal when they weren't at their best, and then we were very, very good on the day. You know, completely deserved the 3 points, but for me and talking to the coach, it's just got to be consistency in how you play, and then consistent, you know, kind of mentally after you concede the goal, how do you react? because for the moment it's varying a little bit too much. But I think we've done so much work and we kind of know how we want to play, and it's actually then just up to us to kind of take it out there and actually just play well, and play more at a 7 out of 10 more than a 4 out of 10, and which I think has kind of been happening, to be honest.
Like, consistency is obviously the end goal in all of this, and I presume it's quite frustrating if you're not achieving that. But from all the teams that you've played with, what is the main thing that underpins consistency when you're trying to turn around this erratic form into something that does resemble something a bit more consistent?
I suppose for us, for this team, it would be, I suppose, trusting the shape that we're in. And that's something that kind of the coach says they've obviously set us up in a certain way that can be, difficult to break down, and then also quite good when you can transition into attack. And it's one of those things. So trust the shape, trust the position that you're in. And we literally just, didn't do some of the basics right. Our basic setups, even for throw-ins, were wrong. Our basic setups for set pieces were wrong. For goal kicks, there was loads of these little things of, why are you here? Because you're supposed to be there. Like, that was what we spoke about, etc., etc. And then just that, I think, just being able to come every week with a similar energy, and obviously just how we have some really brilliantly technical girls. But sometimes it doesn't show every week. But I actually think it's the little bit of just a little shift in mentality and confidence, because it was a very, very tough first half of the season. And, now we've really just got to switch it on, though, and kind of, make sure we fight this battle.
I mean, I know you don't want to be in a relegation battle when the season starts, but it does mean that every game is important, and every moment of every training session you kind of have to be alive to it. It's not like you're mid-table, it's not going one way or the other, you kind of play out the string. Every game matters, and as a professional sports person, like, again, it's not an ideal scenario, but you must feel pretty alive with the whole thing going on.
Listen, it's just one of those different challenges that I personally kind of haven't faced, and and it is just about trying to, as difficult as it is, to still try enjoy that and make, turn it into positives. And maybe that's easier said than done for, kind of a defender in the game, because, I kind of constantly get to do what I love and defend. Whereas then obviously maybe if you're talking to one of the strikers, it is a different story, and they're just trying to even get touches on the ball to be able to kind of get forward. So it is, it's something else to kind of to take on. But I feel like the coaches that we have in now, they are prepping us in every way. They've thrown information at us from day dot, and it's spot on. And then it's just, as I said, then for us to consistently put it in, and we've shown it against Man City and Arsenal, and then actually we kind of struggle against the teams that are around us. So it's just trying to know that there is going to be pressure with the games, but that's sport and that's football, and if you don't want to be towards the bottom of the table, there's we have to dig ourselves out of it together.
Yeah, well, listen, we wish you the very best. It's potentially a historic year for women's football in Ireland. We wish you the very best with the club situation, and obviously we'll keep a very close eye on what's happening with the national team. Thanks a million for joining us this morning, Louise. Cheers.
Thank you, lads.
It's Louise Quinn giving us her thoughts there at the start of 2022, which, as I said, is hopefully going to be a massive year. Big row, a rumble between Barcelona and Dembele.
Oh yeah?
Ousmane Dembele will not play for Barcelona again. It's over.
Right.
But he might not play for anybody else for the rest of the season. Who knows? It's clear that Dembele does not want to continue with Barcelona. He doesn't want to be part of our project. Fabrizio Romano is tweeting this. Barcelona director Alemany has announced this. We told Dembele he has to leave immediately. We expect him to be sold before January the 31st. I mean, you can tell him to leave. He's like, yeah, grand, okay, yeah, fair enough. Who are you selling me to? No, I don't want to go there. Who are you going to sell me to now? No, I don't want to go there either. I'm not signing for them either. But nobody else is in for you. To quote Goodfellas, if you pay me. Pay me. That's what it is. That's how Barcelona very badly run. I think Will has tweeted, Barcelona confirmed Dembele won't play for them again after rejecting their offers of the new contract. They're now going to try and offload him this month rather than allow him to leave on a free. Incredible how badly they used the Neymar money. I mean, when you think about how badly run these football clubs are and the amount of money sloshing around, it's no wonder that the leeches of agents are like, fill this bag for me. What for? I don't know. Just fill it. Okay, no problems. Fill it again. No problems. I don't know. Will he come to the Premier League? Could he rejoin Coutinho? Does he love Stevie G?
That'll be quite the attack for Aston Villa. Ousmane Dembele, Philippe Coutinho, and Ollie Watkins.
Oh, I'd take that. That would be pretty good.
I mean, that's it. That's your Champions League hopes.
Two wingers, Watkins through the middle. Go for it.
Or Danny Ings.
No.
Danny Ings. Who would score more goals in a Premier League season, Ousmane Dembele or Danny Ings?
Well, it depends, right? I mean, is Dembele going to play any minutes? Because he's never fit, you know? That's the other thing. Maybe this is the period of his career where he works out those hamstring injuries and is less porcelain. Who knows? 9:40, we've gone over time. OTB AM brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, with your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Tomorrow, the crappy quiz. Who's on the crappy quiz?
I have no idea.
Right.
Good preparation.
Okay. Aisling O'Reilly's going to be in. I don't think so. I'll talk to you about that later. Alan Quillen's going to be on talking about the weekend's rugby. Rory O'Connor and Keith Wood here reacting to Andy Farrell's squad for the Six Nations with Joe last night. Enjoy.
Welcome along, Wednesday Night Rugby. We have in studio Mr. Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent. Hello.
Hey, Joe.
And Keith Wood, you're there, I would presume, somewhere out there?
In the ether, somewhere, Joe, in the ether.
Well, it's great to have you with us. Andy Farrell's named a 37-man Six Nations squad. It's all getting very real. Spring is on the horizon. This is a nice time of the year, Keith. The darkness of January left behind. Six Nations in the air.
Yeah, it's still dark, Joe.
Right, okay. Let's go a negative route then.
No, I'm not going down the negative route. I love the Six Nations, and I still think there's levels of doubt that hang over it because of COVID and all that, and we're hoping that some of the restrictions are all moved in time, that we have full grounds, because it's hard watching over in England when they have full grounds and we don't here. And we're hoping everything is right and proper for that to be the case. But I love this competition, love the rivalry, love the kind of the craziness that goes with it, and equally well, I'm excited, and I'm excited because I think Andy Farrell has given us reasons to be cheerful in the manner in which he went about the autumn and the style that Ireland chose to play. And I think it's that cheerfulness continues when you look at the squad. There's an awful lot of younger guys in there than there has been, and it's great and heartening to see that. You know, we often tend to get this in the year after a World Cup, but now if we can get it a year and a half before, I think we're in a better position. So yeah, I think it's decent.
Yeah, he's given 20 debutants first caps in 2 years, which isn't a bad record. I was just reading today, Rory. So his 37-man squad. Well, the headline news is that Mac Hansen is in and Michael Lowry is in. They are the uncapped players, the only two uncapped players. And they have both trained in the past, Hansen in November, Lowry in the summer. The other headline news, James Lowe, muscle injury out of nowhere. We hadn't anticipated that news. And of course, Jacob Stockdale took everyone by surprise with a picture in his surgery gown this week as well. So he's out and possibly for the season, certainly the Six Nations. Cian Prendergast of Connacht is in as a development player, and might mention as well Kieran Treadwell recalled
Carty.
Last of his 3 caps in 17. Yeah, Ultan Dillane with La Rochelle in mind now. There's no love, it's over.
Yeah,
instant cutting. No Simon Zebo. Out halves you mentioned. Jack Carty is in. Johnny Sexton of course is in. Joey Carber's in.
Yeah, him and Ian Henderson are interesting because neither of them have really played recently. Henderson hasn't played since the All Blacks game, if I remember correctly. So the fact that they have
they've ruled James Lowe out with a muscle injury, but they're confident enough that Henderson and Carberry can play a role. And you presume, because they change the squad as they go on, you presume they feel they can play a role in those first 2 games, otherwise there's no point in calling them up. So that's pretty encouraging that of the 23 that played against the All Blacks, if we think that that's the starting 23 or the first choice, only James Lowe is absent from that 23, which there's a lot of stability. A lot of the changes that you've mentioned, they're kind of fiddling around the edges of a very strong core, and it's a really strong place to be going into a tournament like this.
It sure is. I'll give you the full squad. I'm sure lots of you listening haven't heard it yet. My apologies. This is in alphabetical order, so if you're trying to just do this in terms of positions, best of luck to you. So the backs, first of all, Bundy Aki is in. Robert Balakoon, after his brilliant form of late, is in. Joey Carberry, he fractured his elbow against Wasps, that memorable day at Wasps, so that's why we haven't seen Joey Carberry since. But Carberry is in. Jack Carty, very much in on the back of his form. 10 caps to his name, Jack Carty. Craig Casey, who has 4 caps, is in. Andrew Conway in. Keith Earls is very much in on 96 caps, Earls, so he could well make the 100 mark this Six Nations, which would be a great and deserved achievement. Jameson Gibson Park, who had that great November, in. Matt Hansen in, uncapped. Robbie Henshaw, of course, in the form of his career, really is in. James Hume, no surprises, in. Hugo Keenan, of course, just 16 caps. Hugo Keenan, he feels like veteran, reliable old stager back there at this stage. Jordan Larmour, going to have an interesting Six Nations maybe. And Michael Lowry, also in with Conor Murray, Gary Ringrose, of course, and Johnny Sexton. So no Simon Zebo, we mentioned Stockdale. No Kieran Frawley, no Harry Byrne. Rory, presumably game time awaits them at Leinster. This is the thinking.
Yeah, I think Frawley can be, consider himself unlucky. He played against Montpellier on Saturday, and for all that it was worth in that, turkey shoot, played quite well, and has, when Leinster have been able to play, he's played. I guess just the lack of games have probably caught up with him, and there are centres ahead of him, and it does. There are games going to go ahead from the URC during the Six Nations. Harry Byrne hasn't really played at all. I think he's got 1.5 games since he's come back, and they didn't go particularly well. Before the November internationals, he hadn't really played either. He really could benefit with a couple of games, and we think we're probably going to get Leinster Ulster and Leinster Munster during the Six Nations, so they're going to be good games as well for them. Even they won't be the top level of those games that we normally are used to. They will be good games. There'll be the Sigma Lions are coming over to play from South Africa, all going well, so there will be a run of games for those players. And I think for a young guy, you're nearly better off being out of this Ireland squad in some ways, and rather than holding tackle bags for 8 weeks of Six Nations training camp, as beneficial and as great an honour as that is, you might be better off just playing 5 games in 6 weeks and actually building into a season and trying to get on that plane to New Zealand if that goes ahead during the summer.
Keith, I'll come to the forwards. Anything in the backs catch your eye?
Yeah, for me, Kieran Frawley, look, I think he stood up pretty well over the last while. I think he's been leapfrogged a little bit by James Hume, who I have to say offers something very different, and he's got a step to die for, and I just think that makes it more interesting. But as the second playmaker, Frawley would be the guy that I'd be looking to have there. I'd like to see him in the squad because I think we're a stronger team if we have that. Yeah, I'm interested what Rory says in terms of the matches that may be filled in there, because that could be the good rationale that sits behind it, because without that I'd have had a couple of other players inside in the squad as development players, and just to try and see what they could learn and get there. I'd like to see a couple of the out halves from Munster up there, Crowley and Ben Healy in particular, I think. I'd like to see Nathan Doak in there, but if they're going to play a lot of matches, maybe they're better off playing the matches. But I do think that there is, I'd go back to a comment Peter O'Mahony said when he came off the autumn internationals, it was the most enjoyable time he'd ever had in an Irish jersey. And so if a guy that's seen it all and captained the Lions and that's his attitude, you'd like to see some young guys get exposed to that as well.
So the point you've both made about games for the players left out notwithstanding, if there has been a leapfrogging here, Keith, it is Harry Byrne who was in November and Jack Carty who wasn't. That's been reversed, and I think
comment though.
Yeah, I think you could say though on both fronts, Byrne's lack of form the few times we've seen him and Carty's obvious form of late, that kind of that decision had to be made, really, unless you're really doubling down on planning for the World Cup and prioritising Harry Byrne.
No, I think Harry Byrne needs to play rugby and play an awful lot of it. He's not playing a huge amount of it, and we've discussed this often, but the view is that he has a high ceiling. Now, that's people who see him all the time and play with him all the time, and he does show glimpses from time to time, but he needs to play a concerted amount of rugby. Jack Carty plays week in, week out, and it's actually something we were going to touch on a couple of weeks ago. We got caught up on something else, but and I'll just talk about Harlequins just for a second. Their key players play every single game, and they play nearly 80 minutes of every single game. So you'll have Joe Marler there, you'll have Dom Brandt, Kerr, Smith, Esterhuizen in the centre. They play every game, pretty much. And that gives the team that core security of knowing that they're there. There is a huge amount of chopping and changing, and we understand why there is at different times, but there has to be, people have to get a chance to have a run, or else they have to move, because nobody wants, and you mentioned it, nobody wants to be a tackle holder anywhere. They want to play rugby. These are rugby players, they're not rugby trainers, and that's tough, because all the provinces have very big squads, 45, 50 players. It's very hard to get game time for all of them, but their job is to play rugby and not just to train rugby.
As an aside, do you think it's shortening those English careers, playing week in, week out?
Well, the guys I mentioned it have played a lot, and I know the game has changed a lot, but I would have played a huge number of games in the season. The most I played in one season was 42 matches. I averaged around 35 matches a season for 5 years. You can do it. You do pick up injuries, and sometimes those injuries are the break you need as well. And the game has become far harder now, and so you don't need to be playing that number. But I don't know whether it's shortening them, but they seem to be getting the performances out of those players that they need and require.
The forwards then, Rory. So Ryan Baird is in with his 6 caps already. Finlay Bealham in. Tadhg Byrne in great form is in. Jack Conan very much in on the back of his Lions tour. Gavin Coombs is in with his 2 caps. Caelan Doris, you're really hoping he gets a good run this year. Tyke Furlong is in, calf muscle or no. Cian Healy in. Ian Henderson, again, question mark over his fitness. Rob Herring is in. Ronan Kelleher, of course, is in, 16 caps to his name. Dave Kilcoyne in. Peter O'Mahony. Tom O'Toole is in. Andrew Porter with 40 caps now. Andrew Porter. James Ryan also on 40 caps. Dan Sheehan with his 2 very much in. Nick Timoney in. Kieran Treadwell back in for the first time in a couple of years. And Josh van der Flair very much in good form. 35 caps to his name in. Is there any case here who's been badly mistreated, looking in from the fringes? There's usually there's a cause du jour usually with these things.
Yeah, we haven't found them yet. I think Ross Maloney's a bit hard done by. I think Treadwell's been going well for Ulster. Wycherley in Munster and Ross Maloney at Leinster, to me, are better players. And Maloney in particular he was picked in the summer squad and didn't get a cap, and we interviewed him. His grandfather played once for Ireland, and he really, it was his kind of almost the fulfilling of a destiny for him to get that cap, and he didn't get it. And he's come back, he looks a bigger player, he looks fitter, he looks stronger, he's a real leader for Leinster. And I thought he was, again, in a turkey shoot, he played very, very well on Sunday, and has played very well all season. I think he's quite unlucky, but Treadwell is an interesting case. He's got the size, he looks like an international rugby player, he just doesn't always play that way. In recent weeks he's been kind of, I think against Leinster in that game in the RDS, he was key to that win at the RDS. I think he's been big in a couple of big games. He's an interesting one, but he's behind the triumvirate who are going to be in the matchday 23, who, if they're fit, in Byrne, Henderson and Ryan. And this is the thing, there's no, Carty was probably the cause celebrity, for the last while. Right now there's no one apart from maybe Frawley, but again, it's, he's making up numbers rather than being in the mix for that 23. I think the 23's relatively nailed on at the moment, so it's hard to make a major case for anyone. I think Maloney, could consider himself hard done by, but that's about it.
I see a message in on YouTube, Keith, wondering about Simon Zebo, who was involved in November, but he's done little else
15 minutes
since this entire season. It hadn't gone for him, so he doesn't have enough credit in the bank probably at this stage to force his way in there.
Again, I don't think he's played enough rugby, and we've seen him for maybe 20 minutes or whatever. and that's all we've seen from him. You know, I think you need to try and get up to match pace, and you need to start playing games to play for Ireland. You know, and it's funny because we'll talk about England, I think, in a while. But Eddie Jones came up with you treat individuals on a case-by-case basis. That is the case. That's, people always say it's fair. It's rarely fair. There's people play favourites, but also they know what people have done. They know how much they've played. They know what they have that's possible. And sometimes you need to be reminded of what you can do. So how could you not pick Balakoon, you know, and or Lowry with their performance last weekend, you know, setting the place on fire. Now, it's not just built on one performance, but for me, I think Balakoon is a serious athlete, could do an awful lot of damage. I thought he was imposing in the game, and hope to see an awful lot more of that.
Okay, let's move on to England then. We're not going to go through every Six Nations squad name this week, but England at a very interesting point. A 36-man squad name by Eddie Jones. I was listening to him being interviewed yesterday around the launch of the squad, and he was saying this is his third team. This is his third regeneration of a team. He said, I inherited the 2015 World Cup team. It was pretty established, and I rode that team all the way to 2017, 2018. At that point, new side from 18 on, which was very much about getting to the World Cup in good shape, and they obviously did. He said, I rode that team until last year, and that team pretty much died. He said each team has 2-3 years in his experience where they're in a good place. And so 2022 for him is a new side. It's his third side, and it's with the World Cup coming into view. The other thing which jumped out to me, Keith, I don't know how optimistic you are about England. We'll go through some of the names in and out, which is interesting. Like, there are a bunch of new names, and there are a bunch of the bigger names like Tuilagi and the Vunipolas and George Ford left out. I think if you'd ask the average person out there, where are England, they would say, oh, they're off a very bad year last year. But in the media, listening to Jones and various pundits discussing it, they are really talking about this win over South Africa in November as the start of something very exciting. You know, we're all very happy with our November. England, in a way we might not be fully appreciating, are very excited on the back of their November. They're coming in here feeling pretty excited about their brand of rugby as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very hard to get too excited for one performance. I looked at them in the autumn. I thought they were a bit fractured, maybe. Like, I'm totally at a loss over Eddie Jones, and it just goes to show you the depth of riches that are in English rugby. You know, with 13 teams and the amount of players that come through that system, to be able to discard some of the players that he does, changing a team every 2 years. That's very brutal, but there's very, very few teams, if any, that do that. You know, you tend to get players that get up to standard, and you try and get the most out of them, and you try and bring new guys in along all the time. But to not pick George Ford, who has played just beautifully all season, I mean, really, really has. Farrell has been out injured. He's back in as captain. Obviously, you want to have Smith in there because he's class. But they've brought in, who is that young guy from Bath?
He's got a hell of a name. Orlando
Bailey.
Bailey, yeah.
Yeah. I've seen him play, but he hasn't stuck out for me now. But again, they say there's a great talent. But I think, yes, that's fantastic. Bring him along. Have him there. He's your development guy. But what happens if Farrell is injured? What do you do then? Just say, yeah, George, you weren't good enough last week, but we'll bring you in now this week. And of course he'll come and do it. But, you know, and there's just an awful lot of players have fallen by the wayside. So, look, I think it's hard. He has been proven to win often. But I don't know that I necessarily would like the manner in which he does it. I think it would be an uncomfortable place to be in his squad. And I know there's criticism sometimes that it's harder to get off squads than on. And I'm not saying that either. You're still looking for a high level of performance. But I think there'd be a lot of queries if he doesn't get it right this year, because England were abject in last year's Six Nations. So it needs to turn around very quickly. He's taken a fairly big gamble and a big risk with it. And I can't say on his head will be it, because he'll be there until the World Cup anyway. But you could destabilise confidence in players. I mean, it's a really interesting selection. I thought, yeah, they're good players, but it was the whole scale raft of changes I thought was the most unusual part.
Well, in his time as England coach, he's had 180 different players in his squad. So, I mean, he goes through players. On Orlando Bailey, for instance, who's just 20 at Bath, as opposed to George Ford, top of the table. The logic on Bailey, it seems, is he can play 10, 12, 15. So, again, with World Cup now a big priority for Jones, that's a nice utility player. So let's get him up to speed. So this is clearly how he's thinking, Rory. I mean, people may not have seen it. Tulagi is very much out, but if he gets a bit of game time, he may come back in. So it's not that Tulagi's been written off. Same for Elliot Daly and same for Sam Underhill. But certainly it seems George Ford out, the Vunapola's out. 6 uncapped players, like there's Luke Northmore, who's 23, scored 10 tries in 13 appearances for Quins and potential in midfield. So there's so much talent coming through. The composition there in midfield, it does seem like he's looking at Smith certainly at 10, Marcus Smith to continue at 10, Farrell at captain 12, and maybe a Henry Slade, for instance, at 13. But that overarching idea of regeneration, it's my third team, it's now you think 2019 territory, but it's now World Cup coming into view for Jones. Maybe he had no option given how last year went, but to try something like this, I don't know. Yeah,
it's just interesting the way he lays it out and the way he explains it. There's a lovely clarity to it, and it makes sense. When you explain it there's an awful lot of sense to it, and then you look at the actual decisions and the players that he's leaving out, and you're scratching your head at how players of that quality could be jettisoned. I mean, Ireland just don't have the luxury to. I mean, I was one of the people who would have said maybe we should move on from some of the senior players after the World Cup.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.